My name is Luna. I've been married to Lucas for 3 years. We used to live alone when we were dating. But after we got married, we moved in with Lucas's dad because his job was close by. I kept working even after we got married, but I had to quit my job because Lucas's dad needed help. He started showing signs of forgetting things about a year and a half ago, and it got worse over time. We thought about putting him in a nursing home, but Lucas wanted me to take care of him at home. Luna, please, let's take care of my dad at home. It's better for his health. I get it, but I've only been here for 2 years. I don't think your dad wants me to take care of him all the time. Please help me out as much as you can. I had never seen my husband beg like this before, so I trusted that he would help me with the caregiving. But once I actually started looking after his dad, I realized there were challenges I hadn't anticipated. Simple tasks like going up and down stairs, using the toilet, and taking a bath became risky at home. Even though my father-in-law could still walk, he often stumbled on the stairs and had accidents in the bathroom because he couldn't support himself. So, after discussing with my husband, we decided to renovate the house. Despite still being in debt, we prioritized my father-in-law's safety over money. At first, my husband took charge of caregiving after the renovations, but gradually he stopped, blaming his workload for his absence. After a year of caring for my father-in-law, my husband gradually stopped pitching in, even going out on his days off. As my father-in-law's condition worsened, I found myself handling tasks like toileting and bathing alone. Eventually, it became too overwhelming, and I had to talk to my husband about it. You promised to help, remember? When was the last time you did anything? It's been months. He seems content with the care he's receiving, and I can't manage everything alone anymore. I've realized the challenges firsthand. Maybe we should consider a nursing home instead of trying to manage at home. We made the decision to provide home care, and we should see it through till the end. At the very least, I believe we should consider hiring professional caregivers. Your father needs assistance, and there are certified professionals who can provide that help. I'm not physically capable of handling everything, and I think certain tasks like feeding should be left to the professionals. When I proposed this, my husband didn't agree and left before we could finish our conversation. Lately, I've noticed he's been stressed about money. However, I couldn't manage caregiving alone anymore. So without his approval, I began arranging for home care services. Since his father required level 3 care, we arranged for a caregiver to come about 5 times a week for an hour each day. We'd also worked out a plan covered by long-term care insurance, so I wasn't concerned about the expenses. However, a problem arose on the first day of the home care services. Hello, I'm Mira, your caregiver. I'm looking forward to working with you. Nice to meet you, Mira. I'm also looking forward to working with you. While the caregiver engaged with my father-in-law, she kindly instructed me on nursing care techniques, which I found immensely helpful. I felt reassured by our decision to hire her. However, my husband returned home after being out. Luna, I never authorized home care services. What's going on here? He directed his frustration at me, despite my previous explanation that I couldn't manage caregiving alone anymore. Excuse me, Miss Caregiver? Please leave for today, he commanded, disregarding the scheduled time for her visit and effectively sending her away. Why did you arrange for home care without consulting me? I make the decisions in this house. You're not being a good wife by not listening to me. You should be able to handle caregiving by yourself. It's a waste of money, especially with the loan we took out for the renovations. Why can't you understand? I've told you numerous times that I can't handle it alone. Lucas, you've stopped helping with caregiving, haven't you? You're not keeping your promise. And the renovations were necessary for your father's safety. If he falls and gets hurt, caregiving will be even more challenging. Maybe you don't realize because you haven't been involved in caregiving for over a year now. What's all this sudden talk about? And besides, you're not working, so it's only natural for you to handle it, right? Who do you think is paying off the loan for the renovations? No matter how much I tried to explain, my husband couldn't grasp the situation. He genuinely believed that it was my sole responsibility to manage everything. Following that incident, I only arranged for home care when my husband was at work. Having someone to talk to, not just about caregiving, but also about the issues with my husband, and receiving advice, proved to be incredibly beneficial. After several months had passed, one day my husband unexpectedly offered to take over caregiving. "You've been out of the loop for over a year now. Go treat yourself. Get a haircut or go shopping. I'll handle everything today." I gratefully accepted his offer. I treated myself to a haircut for the first time in ages and enjoyed some quiet time sipping tea at a coffee shop I used to frequent. However, after about 4 hours, feeling anxious about leaving my inexperienced husband in charge, I decided to head home early. Upon returning home, I found an unsettling silence. My father-in-law was peacefully asleep in his room, but my husband was nowhere to be found. As I looked around the house, I discovered an envelope placed on the dining table. Inside the envelope were completed divorce papers and a letter. The letter stated, "Even after the divorce, please continue taking care of my dad. I'm going on a trip for a week, so please file the divorce papers by the time I return." That's what it said. My husband abruptly ended the call, leaving me bewildered. Just before the line went dead, I'd overheard a woman's voice calling his name. It was evident he was with someone, possibly the woman he planned to go on an overseas trip with. We had only been married for 3 years, and the thought of my husband having an affair weighed heavily on me. As I grappled with the possibility of his infidelity, tears of regret filled my eyes. But amidst this turmoil, a glimmer of comfort emerged when I heard my father-in-law's voice calling out to me as I left. Lately, he had struggled to remember my name, but today, for the first time in a while, he called it out. Concerned about how my husband had been caring for him in my absence, I rushed to check on my father-in-law. "Father, are you feeling all right? Was everything okay while I was gone? Luna, will the caregiver be here today?" To my surprise, my father-in-law seemed lucid and able to hold a coherent conversation. Could dementia improve over time? "She won't be here today. She'll come tomorrow morning." "All right. Could you get me some paper and a pen then?" Despite his usual struggle with writing, my father-in-law appeared unusually composed today. I had read that writing could help mitigate dementia symptoms, so I indulged him. Handing him paper and a pen, he began to write something, though I couldn't see what it was. After he finished, he sealed the paper in an envelope and handed it to me. "Please give this to the caregiver when she comes tomorrow." With that request, my father-in-law drifted back to sleep. Was this some sort of dementia exercise with Mira? Though I was curious about the letter's contents, I chose not to peek. Hours later, when my father-in-law woke up again, he seemed to have no recollection of our earlier conversation, not even remembering my name. That night left me questioning everything. As my father-in-law drifted off to sleep, I found myself lost in thought, re-examining the letter and divorce papers my husband had left behind. Reflecting on his recent behavior, I realized there had been several suspicious actions that I had overlooked in my focus on caregiving. If my husband was indeed cheating, part of me wanted to end the marriage and leave immediately. But I couldn't abandon my father-in-law, and with my inability to work while caring for him, I worried about financial independence. As morning approached, I remained undecided. When Mira arrived the next morning, I handed her the letter my father-in-law had given me. After reading it, Mira, not just a caregiver, but also a friend, approached me with concern. "Luna, situations like these are unfortunately common. I'm here to support you. The letter is about my husband wanting a divorce. Yes, it seems Mr. Henley noticed something was wrong and reached out for help. There's more in the letter, but we'll discuss it later. Since we have limited time before your husband returns, let's act quickly." With determination, Mira arranged for another caregiver to take over Mr. Henley's care. "Let's go, Luna. We have work to do." Following Mira, we arrived at a law firm. "Mira, why are we here?" I inquired. "You'll understand once we're inside," she replied cryptically. Though confused, I decided to trust Mira and followed her into the building. Thank you for coming today. I'd like to discuss a request I received from Mr. Henley, primarily regarding the matter of gifting property during one's lifetime to you, Luna. The lawyer greeted us, handing me a document. Stunned, I accepted the paper. It was a notarized document, prepared by Mira at Mr. Henley's request. It outlined Mr. Henley's intention to gift me $36,000 and his apartment during his lifetime. Amazed by this unexpected gesture, Mira began to explain. On the first day of my home visit, Mr. Henley brought up this matter. He wanted to express his gratitude towards you, Luna. However, as you weren't legally adopted by him, he couldn't pass on his assets to you upon his death. Hence, he decided to make this lifetime gift instead. I'm incredibly grateful. I need to thank my father-in-law immediately, I exclaimed, eager to express my appreciation. But before we could leave, Mira interjected, we need to make one more stop. After following Mira and making another stop, we returned home. Upon arriving, I expressed my deep gratitude to my father-in-law, even though he seemed unable to fully comprehend. I continued to thank him earnestly. Sadly, my father-in-law passed away 3 days later due to complications from his worsening dementia. I tried calling my husband, who was traveling abroad, to inform him, but he didn't pick up, perhaps assuming it was about the divorce. Left with no other option, Mira and I proceeded with the funeral arrangements amidst the gathering of relatives and friends. My husband's absence, as the biological son of my father-in-law, seemed to disappoint the relatives. When my husband returned home 2 days later, oblivious to the situation, he was immediately bombarded with questions from the relatives. Hey, you need to help me out here. I swear I'm not cheating. I was just on vacation for a change. After taking care of my dad every day, you can't just assume the worst. Even if I say I was caregiving, there's no proof, right? But I know for a fact that you were spotted at the airport with your mistress, acting like a couple. After my accusation, my husband seemed resigned and silently endured the harsh words from the relatives. Several days later, once the tension had eased, I initiated divorce proceedings. I planned to move into the apartment my father-in-law had gifted me before his passing. As I made preparations for the divorce, my husband called. Luna, where are you? It turns out you're the beneficiary of his life insurance, not me. All I was supposed to receive was his life insurance payout. What's going on? What'd you say to my dad while caring for him? You and that caregiver seem to have an understanding. You must have been planning this together. It was your father's decision. Mira simply followed his wishes. Indeed, we're getting divorced, and you and your mistress will be hearing from my lawyer soon. Please ensure you pay the settlement. What do you mean we're divorcing? That's correct. Since you received my father's life insurance, consider it your settlement payment. I won't ask for anything. It seemed my husband had conveniently forgotten about leaving me the divorce papers to submit before his overseas trip. I was taken aback by his apparent disregard for our previous arrangement. Weren't the divorce papers left by you with a letter asking me to submit them? I reminded him. And the life insurance is an inheritance from your father, not something I received from you. You should cover the cost of the settlement. My husband was rendered speechless and remained silent at my firm assertion. Realizing we were getting nowhere, we decided to end the call. Despite his subsequent attempts to contact me, I followed Mira's advice and changed my phone number. I still see Mira occasionally. Even after my father-in-law passed away, she continued to support both him and me more than my own family did. I'm truly grateful to Mira. Eventually, word seemed to reach my husband and his mistress, and I received a call from their lawyer. Because I heard from Lucas that you were the boss. Although I was unaware of the circumstances, I deeply apologize for vacationing while Lucas's father was struggling. I've already paid compensation. I don't intend to see Lucas anymore. That was the end of it. I had expected resistance to paying the compensation, so I was surprised by the unexpected response. I couldn't fathom why a sensible person like her would fall for someone like my husband. Meanwhile, my husband ended up paying the compensation. It turned out her family was quite affluent, and my husband, attempting to keep up with her, depleted nearly all his savings. I heard he even footed the bill for the vacation as a display of goodwill. Whether or not he depleted his savings was of no concern to me. I intended for him to pay the full compensation, even if it took time. Since the family home was in my father-in-law's name, he wouldn't have trouble finding a place to live. However, with the remaining payments on the loan for the elder care renovation, coupled with the compensation, it would likely be a significant burden. Each month, even if it was deducted from my husband's salary, he wouldn't have much left. It was common knowledge among our relatives, so seeking help from them was out of the question. I hoped he would reflect on his actions. I relocated to the apartment my father-in-law had gifted me, where I now live comfortably. I'm using the money inherited from my father-in-law to pursue a caregiving certificate. Mira is assisting me in this endeavor. Not only do I aspire to be a caregiver, but I also aim to emulate Mira's support for families in need. One day, my husband approached me and inquired, "Hey, how much money do we have in that safe?" I couldn't help but chuckle and replied, probably around $500,000 in total. Now, the following day, upon returning home, I discovered a signed divorce paper on the living room table. Both my husband and the vault were gone. My name is Helen, a 58-year-old working housewife who still puts in diligent effort at my job. You see, my hobby is saving money. Ever since my childhood, my mother opened a savings account for me, teaching me that depositing money in the bank would make the numbers in my passbook grow. I found it incredibly enjoyable to witness this growth. Starting with just $1, I would deposit a little bit at a time, relishing the experience of watching it accumulate. As my savings grew over the years, earning a few cents in interest annually became a delightful surprise to my younger self. With a fondness for money and understanding how it works, I pursued a career as a financial planner, offering advice on asset management. One day, a college friend approached me concerned about an old childhood friend who was in serious trouble due to debt. They asked if I could offer some advice, and intrigued, I agreed to meet with him. This friend, named Mark, was a handsome man with a refreshing smile. He shared his story, confessing his love for gambling and the struggles he faced in making ends meet. Feeling sympathetic, I offered Mark some guidance. Given his precarious financial situation, I advised him to consolidate his debts and reduce his monthly payments to better manage his life. As my friend had asked for my help, I willingly lent a hand. Looking back now, I realized that perhaps I had developed a slight crush on Mark during our interactions. Little did I know that this would lead to a series of troublesome events. Against the advice of my friend, Mark and I decided to get married, believing that our union would help us face his debts together. Due to my stable income and financial expertise, most of Mark's income went towards paying off his debt. I made sure he severed ties with his parents to prevent the debt from escalating. Additionally, I provided Mark with a monthly allowance of $500. However, when Mark decided to cut ties with his parents, they responded with anger and resentment. His mother labeled him an ungrateful child, regretting ever giving birth to him. His father too expressed his discontent, desiring to confront me for what he considered thieving behavior. It was clear that they believed Mark belonged to them as a means to repay their debts. Exhausted from dealing with his parents' debt for so long, Mark finally stood up for himself, declaring he was not their ATM. He returned to me, feeling relieved to be free from their constant reminders of the financial burden. Soon after, we welcomed a son, Kevin, who bore a striking resemblance to Mark. Kevin became my pride and joy, but unfortunately, he inherited his father's lack of discipline and indecisiveness. Just as our son noticed Mark's carefree character, he also observed the never-ending cycle of borrowing money from predatory lenders, dealing with loan sharks, and tricking friends into lending him money for gambling. Our journey was not without its challenges, but I managed to keep Mark on track. Over the span of 23 years, we gradually reduced Mark's debt to around $10,000, nearing full repayment. One day, while on the verge of achieving our financial goal, Mark received a call from his parents. They informed him that his father had collapsed and was at the hospital. Concerned, Mark left work early to be by his parents' side. He messaged me, apologizing for breaking our promise and explaining the situation. I encouraged him to go and comfort his parents, assuring him it was all right. As Mark continued visiting his parents at the hospital, I provided him with a little extra money for the hospital fees they couldn't afford. It seemed my in-laws were struggling financially and relying on Mark for support. Although he withdrew a significant amount from our joint funds each visit, around $1,000 to $2,000 per month, I chose to let it slide, understanding their need for assistance. A year had passed since my father-in-law's collapse, and both my in-laws had aged significantly. They sought someone to lean on, and I suppose they found comfort in Mark's presence. Meanwhile, I continued my hobby of saving money. One day, I retrieved my bank book from the vault and smiled. Mark, who usually showed no interest in my financial endeavors, looked at me and asked, "Hey, how much money do we have in that bank account you always look at so happily?" I casually replied, "It's about $500,000 now." However, the next morning, I discovered divorce papers completed and left in the living room. Both Mark and the safe were gone. As I sat there having breakfast, I couldn't help but smile. I knew Mark had his eyes on the money in the vault, and he had planned to take it all. Imagining him attempting to carry the entire vault nearly made me burst out laughing. In our home, we had a black cat named Luna. We had installed a pet camera to watch Luna's adorable antics, which served as healing moments throughout my day. Luna provided a sense of comfort amid the unexpected turn of events. While watching the pet camera during my lunch breaks, I was always greeted by the adorable sight of my child. But one day, as I switched on the camera, something unexpected unfolded in our living room. My in-laws and my husband Mark engaged in an unbelievable conversation. "Oh, you live in such a nice house, Mark. Your good salary makes your mother so proud," they flattered him. Mark's father responded proudly, "Indeed, I make a decent salary myself. However, Helen takes it all, and I'm left with a mere allowance of $500 a month." "Are you kidding me? That's outrageous. You should be getting more," they exclaimed, sympathizing with Mark. "Why do you obey such a tyrant like Helen? You could live a much better life on your own," they continued. "Mark, you're our pride. You could have saved hundreds of thousands by now. But she's exploiting you? Poor thing." They manipulated him. Listening to their conversation, I wondered if they had completely forgotten that I had worked hard to pay off Mark's debts. I pondered what was going on in their heads. In the past, it was Mark burdened with debt from his parents, and I had to provide them with cash every month, making it challenging for us to get by. "Did you know she has a bank book with tons of savings? It's not fair that you only get $500. Mark complained, and in that moment, my in-laws' eyes lit up. They exchanged glances and eagerly leaned in, awaiting Mark's response. Last I heard, I think it was around $400,000 or $500,000, Mark answered. "Mark, isn't that money rightfully yours?" they asked, trying to persuade him. "It may not match the effort you've put in, but shouldn't you be receiving that money?" "Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm starting to think the same thing," Mark conceded. Despite his good looks, Mark was easily influenced and indecisive. In the past, I found this endearing and wholeheartedly devoted myself to him. However, it seemed he was being manipulated by his parents once again, and they were about to touch my precious savings. Witnessing this scene was incredibly painful. Tears streamed down my face as I sat at my desk at work, holding my phone. For the past 23 years, I had diligently set aside my own living expenses from Mark's income, primarily using it to pay off our debt. On top of that, I provided him with a $500 allowance from my own pocket. Despite explaining this to Mark, it appeared he had completely forgotten what the past 23 years had been for. I felt a deep sadness and pitifulness, as if I were drowning in my own tears in that moment. I made the decision to record the conversation and promptly sent the data to my son. Claiming sickness, I left work early and headed to my regular bar, where I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. Pouring out my heart to the bartender, he gently comforted me, saying, "Why do you greed for someone like that? You've done nothing wrong. There's no need to live for them. Live for yourself." In that moment, my love for my husband and my intoxication faded away. "Thank you, sir. Next time, we'll share a pleasant dream," I said to the bartender before leaving. Returning home, I entered my study and began devising a plan to retrieve the bank book from the safe. I couldn't fathom how to accomplish it, but I was determined to show them hell. They should never underestimate me. Concentrating harder than ever, I knew that gathering evidence was the first step. From that day on, I diligently checked the pet camera every day, and slowly, the ugly truths began to surface. Instead of the woman my husband was having an affair with, my in-laws started appearing on the camera in our house. They were discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. "Is everything arranged to take that bank book from Helen?" they asked, grinning unpleasantly. "You're smart. You must have thought of something, right?" "Yeah, I have a plan. I'm thinking of taking the entire vault." "It'll be easy," Mark responded confidently. "But the safe is quite heavy." "Are you sure you can handle it?" his father questioned. "I'll be fine. I'll load it onto a cart." "Dad, helping out," Mark replied, and his father agreed, saying, "All right, I'll assist you anytime." The safe weighed around 120 pounds, confirming my suspicion that Mark, despite his good looks, was not very smart. At that moment, I solemnly pledged to drag these people down to the depths of hell. They had not only betrayed me, but also ruined the precious moments I spent watching Luna, our cat. Witnessing my husband's infidelity through the camera was a painful blow. I had hoped to find solace in Luna's presence, but even she seemed scared and wouldn't show up. These people had shattered my peace, but I vowed to punish them severely. One day, while I was working, I activated the pet camera once again. This time, it wasn't the woman my husband was having an affair with. Instead, it was my in-laws at our house, discussing their plan to take the bank book from me. With determination in my heart, I continued to gather evidence, and soon the day would come when I would execute my plan and show them the consequences of underestimating me. Facing the reality of my impending divorce, I found myself strangely accepting of the situation. Just how desperate were these people to go after money? I sat at my office desk, sipping coffee, and recorded the scene on my phone screen. Surprisingly, I wasn't upset or sad anymore. If they had such intentions, so did I. I was determined to show them the consequences of their actions. Then, the day finally arrived. "Hey, how much money is in that passbook on the vault? You always seem so happy when you're looking at it," Mark asked. "Right now, there's about $500,000 in there," I replied casually. The next day when I arrived home, I discovered a signed divorce paper in the living room. Both my husband and the vault were gone. A smirk formed on my face as I sat down to have breakfast. I acted quickly, immediately filing the divorce papers and contacting my son Kevin. "Your father finally stole the vault. Can't believe he managed to carry it. It's so heavy," I told him. Kevin responded, "Mom, I think it's about time you end things with Dad. By the way, did he take everything in the vault too?" "No, actually, I moved all the money to online banking. The passbook is essentially worthless now. The most valuable thing might have been the safe itself since it was so heavy. Oh, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. Now I'm thinking about filing a police report. What do you think?" I explained to Kevin, who agreed and suggested that I should file a police report and hire a lawyer. "Right, a lawyer. I already have a private investigator on it, but I hadn't thought about a lawyer." "Thanks," I replied to Kevin. He seemed exasperated. Following Kevin's suggestion, I reached out to a lawyer through my private investigative contact. I handed over the recording from my pet camera to both the police and the lawyer, and then I waited. After a while, I received a call from my ex-husband, sounding quite frantic. "What the hell? The passbook is empty." "What happened to the $500,000? You tricked me. That was my money. Where is it?" Tell me now, or I'm going back to the house and abandoning your cat Luna, he threatened. You just committed theft, and now you're threatening me. From now on, communicate through my lawyer, I calmly responded and blocked his number. I reported the incident to the police and sent the recording to my lawyer. It was a relief to finally take action. This was exactly what I had wanted to do. A short while later, I received a call from the police. We have caught the thief. However, the vault was damaged. It appears he forced it open, and the things inside were burned. They informed me. My ex-husband and his parents learned that the passbook balance was zero, and they set the contents of the vault on fire. Although it was his first offense, my ex-husband spent a few days in custody. Discoveries continued as my ex-husband broke into the house he used to live in after his release. However, I had already filed for a divorce and obtained a restraining order. When he started causing a scene, I called the police, and within 10 minutes, they took him away again. I contacted my lawyer, explained what happened, and had him start the process of getting a restraining order. Furthermore, I asked the lawyer to sue for emotional distress due to his infidelity. The lawyer mentioned that we might not get much money from his broke family, but that didn't really matter to me. What I wanted was alimony. It seems my ex-husband broke into our house because he was discarded by his mistress and wanted to get back with me. His mistress promptly transferred $10,000 as alimony and seemed to have disappeared. It appears they split after the vault incident, realizing that when the money runs out, so does the love. My underpaid ex-husband, who still has $10,000 in debt, and his gambling-addicted parents seem to be struggling with their daily lives. He is living in an old single-room apartment without a bath, constantly quarreling with his parents. This information came from my lawyer. My ex-husband pleaded with me, saying, "I can't afford to pay the alimony. Please reduce the amount." But I refused, telling him to stay away from me. "If you're really sorry, show it with money," I said. If he had stayed with me, he had planned to end the remaining $10,000 of debt by the time he retired. But he fell for the sweet talk of his gambling-addicted parents-in-law. In the end, how foolish they all were. The $500,000 in savings was the accumulation of my hard work since a young age. I find joy in saving small change and updating the bank book. Now I will start a new bank book. I am living a relaxed life with my black cat Luna. My son visits occasionally and tells me about his girlfriend. This time, I am going to spend time for myself. I need to buy a new safe, one that's so big that a person can't carry it. Right, Luna? I am the happiest I've ever been.
He's retiring, so to celebrate, I'm taking our parents to France starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card for the trip. We're going to enjoy ourselves using your credit card. What a trip. What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. No, I don't understand what you mean by exactly what I said. Please explain. We need to hurry. I understand. We'll leave soon. Sorry, I have to go now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one thing though, the credit card won't work. Huh? My jobless husband Parker took my credit card to take our parents on a trip. I've put up with a lot from Parker, but this seems like the perfect chance. I'm going to make sure Parker learns a lesson, and when he returns from the trip, he'll have some big regrets. I'm Lee, a 32-year-old employee at a major company. After graduating from a top university, I landed a great job and have been doing well. Even though I'm only 32, I make enough money to support Parker, who doesn't work, and a child, if we had one. But that's just a possibility. We've been married for 2 years and don't have kids yet, though we're thinking about it. Despite having a good job and income, I'm not happy with my newly life. The part about having a child is just an idea, but Parker not working is real. I'm not hungry for dinner because I had snacks. That's fine, but what about your job search? I didn't go for an interview today. I just stayed home looking at job websites. Parker quit his job a year ago and has been looking for work since then. Actually, he's been doing part-time jobs but doesn't keep them for long. He starts a job, quits shortly after, relaxes for a while, then looks for another part-time job. You're looking at part-time jobs again, aren't you? I'm looking at both full-time and part-time. Why don't you stop looking for part-time jobs and focus on finding a full-time position? I know, but there is a right time for everything. I wish Parker would find a steady job, but there's a reason he can't be pushed too hard. He quit his last job because of a conflict over work policies with his boss. That boss was notoriously difficult. Parker stood up to him as the office representative with his colleagues' support. But when the conflict escalated, his colleagues sided with the boss, not Parker. As a result, Parker lost his boss's approval, felt betrayed by his colleagues, and found it hard to stay, so he left the company. Parker, dinner's ready. Can you bring it here? After quitting his job, Parker became withdrawn, staying in his room. After about 2 weeks, he began to come out and help with household chores. I'll do the dishes. Really? Thanks. Then it's all yours. Yeah, I've got plenty of time. Parker joked, but his smile didn't seem genuine. Yet, another 2 weeks later, he started looking for a new job. I have an interview today. Is it your top choice? Yeah, I'm going to nail this one and make a fresh start. I'm rooting for you. Do your best. A month after quitting his job, Parker started looking for work more seriously. But even after another month, he couldn't find a job. Why do they keep rejecting me? It's all because of my last company. Don't lose heart. You'll find something good. Of course I'm frustrated. I didn't do anything wrong. Parker may not be completely blameless, but what happened at his previous job wasn't entirely his fault either. However, quitting due to interpersonal issues doesn't impress potential employers. It feels like nothing I do is right anymore. That's not true. You have an interview tomorrow. Let's update your resume. It's pointless. I'm not going to that interview. Repeated rejections took a toll on Parker, and eventually he became defiant. One day, I returned home to find torn-up resumes scattered on the living room floor, knowing his interview hadn't gone well. Carefully choosing my words, I said, "Can you throw that trash in the bin? I'm done." Done with what? Job hunting. We can manage on Layla's income, right? I don't need to work. It was true, we could get by on my salary alone. Some people choose not to work and excel as full-time homemakers, but that wasn't Parker's situation. He seemed to be avoiding reality. Understanding his reluctance after his rough experience at his last job and the fruitless job search, I decided to be patient with him for a while. Parker, you still haven't found a job. What's your plan? I've worked hard in the past. This is just a long break. I'm not just sitting around, I'm preparing for the future. That's good to hear. Living near my in-laws, Parker's mom, my Layla, and dad, Nicholas, started visiting us more after he quit his job. They were probably worried about him. When they heard Parker was preparing for his next job, they seemed relieved, but that was far from the truth. The beer's running out today. Can you grab some on your way home? It's running out again? You drink too much? Try to cut back a bit. Fine, I won't ask again. I'll get it myself. Parker wasn't studying or job hunting. He spent his days watching TV and drinking beer. He probably didn't want others to know he was unemployed. I decided not to tell my in-laws the truth to spare Parker's feelings, even though he hadn't looked for a job in over 3 months. Finally, I decided to bring it up. Parker, maybe it's time to start job hunting again. You seem more settled now. What? It's only been 6 months since my last job. You want me to work again after what happened? I just think the break has been quite long. Stop nagging. You can't understand my feelings when your job is going well. I have my own struggles, you know. Everyone faces work problems and relationship issues. We can work through this together. I understand. I'll start looking for a job, okay? Parker walked out during our conversation. My words seemed to have hurt him, but his agreement to job hunt felt like progress. I planned to apologize when he felt better. I got a job because you pushed me. That's great. Where? At a nearby supermarket. So you'll need to learn and work hard, right? It's just part-time. No need to work too hard. Part-time or not, any job is important. Do you have a problem with that? I wanted to say more to Parker, but I decided to see how even a small step like this could help him recover. I chose to wait and observe. I'm home. Parker, you're back. How's the job at the pub? I quit the supermarket part-time. Why? It hasn't been that long. A college student there was being bossy, always telling me to put the vegetable boxes at the bottom in storage. It felt like harassment. That student was probably just showing Parker how to do the job. In any workplace, even a college student might be more experienced. Parker kept finding and quitting jobs, unable to stick with any. So Parker hasn't been able to keep a job for long, and it's already been a year. Parker, what job are you doing now? I'm working part-time at a pub. I've never worked in food and beverage before, but it's interesting, and I think I finally found my calling. Really? That's great, but isn't the income from a part-time job in a restaurant kind of low? That's fine. I'm currently apprenticing, aiming to go independent. So, you plan to own your own place someday? Exactly. The income's small now, but I'm working hard towards my goal. Then take this. Treat yourself to something nice for once. Parker still puts on a good show in front of his parents, but as always, it's all lies. He quit the pub job 3 days after this conversation, deceiving everyone and even taking allowance from his parents. This time, I couldn't help but feel disappointed in my husband, so I decided to be firmer than before. Hey Parker. Later please, I'm at a good part in the movie. You can pause it. I grabbed the remote control from the table, paused the movie, and started a conversation. It's frustrating when you pause at the best part. What is it? Parker, you're 35 now, right? You know that's prime working age. Don't you think about the future? Spending all day at home, drinking, and just watching TV. The future? There are plenty of 35-year-olds not working. Many people enjoy life without a job. True, work isn't everything, but those people have something else they're dedicated to. Do you have something like that? Yeah. I know you're upset about me not working. I'll look for another part-time job. Parker seems set on only working part-time. Considering his reasons for leaving his job and his struggles with job hunting, I've been careful not to upset him. But it's time for Parker to get back on track. I need to be firmer. One day at work, I received a text from Parker. Dad's retiring, so we're going to France to celebrate starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card. We're going to enjoy ourselves on your credit card. I panicked and called him immediately. What do you mean, a trip? Just what I said. I don't understand. Just what I said. Please explain. There are so many things wrong here. It's okay to celebrate Nicholas's retirement, but Parker should have talked to me before using my money and borrowing my credit card. More like taking without asking. And why am I paying for a trip to France that I'm not even going on? Parker probably told his parents he paid for it from his savings, my credit card. Just thinking about it makes me so angry, but one thing Parker said stands out. You mentioned borrowing a credit card. Do you mean the one from our house? Yeah, why? I do have a platinum card. Some people think you need a high income for it, but that's not true. Credit history, stable income, and other factors matter, and you can get one in your 30s. It has a high annual fee, but I use it for the benefits and points. However, that credit card is in my wallet. So you took the credit card from home? Yeah, so I'm counting on you for the payment. Parker, excited about his trip to France, spoke to me in a challenging tone. I've been patient with Parker for a long time, but now it seems like the right moment to take action. Parker thinks he's smart for taking my credit card and acting cheerful about it, but he's about to realize otherwise. What are you waiting for? We need to leave. Got it. Sorry, I have to go now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one more thing. That credit card you took won't work. What? That can't be right. It's under Lila's name, and it expires this month. It's close, but it shouldn't be an issue. You're lying, right, Lila? You're lying to stop me from using the card, aren't you? That's such an obvious lie. Yes, it does expire this month. That's why I've already received a new credit card. What does that mean? So I have 2 credit cards to use now. Sometimes, when a new card is activated, the old one stops working. I've already started using the new card, so the one you took won't work. What? Are you kidding me? You think I'm lying. If you don't believe me, I can send you the URL to the credit card website, or you can just try using the card. It would be funny to see you try to pay with a card that doesn't work. This credit card really won't work. Hey, hurry up. I hear his parents calling him in the background, but Parker, realizing the credit card won't work, seems too flustered to respond to them. What should I do? I told them I pay for everything except the round-trip travel. Oh, they covered the flight? Yes, Dad felt bad about covering all the trip costs. What should I do? I'm about to take a cab, and I don't even have money for that. That's not my problem. You said you would pay for everything except the flight. Using my credit card in the first place was wrong. You should pay with your own money. How can I? I don't have any money right now, Parker. You haven't been taking work seriously. It's your fault for trying to impress, taking your parents on a trip without any money. I'm at work, so I have to hang up now. I just wanted to tell you about the credit card. Wait. I hung up and returned to work. Parker, unable to pay for even the cab, would have to come clean with his parents. That evening, after I finished work, I received a call from my Layla. I heard from Parker. He tried to use your credit card and lied about working. I'm sorry for the trouble. No, don't apologize, my Layla. I'm sorry for the inconvenience with the credit card. Are you okay with the money? We'll cover the cost of this trip when we return. I'll make sure Parker apologizes and starts looking for a job immediately. I'm sorry, my Layla, but I'm considering divorcing Parker. Divorce? Because of this? It's part of it, but Parker has been taking money from me for a while. What? I stopped giving Parker money to limit his drinking. He got a part-time job and started buying his own alcohol. But his part-time salary wouldn't cover daily drinking. Parker was taking money from my wallet to buy alcohol. He repeatedly took amounts ranging from $4 to $40. Over a year, the total became significant. I hadn't been tough on Parker, hoping he would change, but when he took my credit card for his trip, it wasn't just about $42 anymore. This increase in what he took made me believe he had no intention of changing. I understand. Should I inform Parker about the divorce? Could you just tell him I want a divorce? We'll discuss the rest when he gets home. About an hour later, the next morning after my conversation with my Layla, Parker called. He must have learned about the divorce from my Layla, though I had asked her to wait until he returned to discuss it. Feeling drained, I chose not to answer his call. When I returned home from work that evening, I found Parker already there. He had cut his trip short. I'll start working seriously now. Please don't leave me, he pleaded as soon as I entered the living room. Seeing Parker, he'd immediately apologized. His remorse seemed genuine, but it came too late. He had a whole year to change, yet he was asking for another chance now. Despite my repeated warnings, he had wasted every opportunity. I'm not going to give Parker another chance because he gave up on me. My decision is final. Can you leave? Please don't say that. If you won't leave, should I move out? Only if you can afford the rent here. Parker fell silent. He didn't even have the money for next month's rent, let alone any income. My words and the reality of the impending divorce seemed to sink in for him. With nothing to take, Parker appeared to leave the house, likely heading to his parents' place. I briefly considered asking if he had money for transportation, but Parker isn't a child. He should handle his own affairs. Sadly, I watched him go. After leaving our house, Parker went to his parents' home. Later, I received a call from my Layla. They allowed Parker to stay for one night, but asked him to leave the next day. They were concerned he might become too dependent on them if he stayed longer. It must have been tough for them as parents to make this decision, but they felt it was necessary for Parker's sake. Cast out by his parents, Parker returned to our house, pleading with me. Please help me. I've got nowhere to go and no money. That's the result of your own actions. You need to handle this yourself. Everyone faces difficulties, and while it's okay to seek help sometimes, all you've done in the past year is neglect your responsibilities and do as you please. I didn't allow Parker into the house and turned him away from the doorstep. The divorce eventually went through. Parker was hesitant, but with his parents' support, it happened faster than expected. I'm not sure what happened to Parker afterward, but he's likely still moving from job to job and making excuses. I thought I would feel lonely without Parker, but I didn't. His attitude had been stressful, and I was always careful not to upset him. No longer needing to accommodate him, I've been living more comfortably. Unconsciously, our life together was a burden. I'm relieved I didn't let myself get dragged down with him. Now, I can live without having to cater to anyone else. Get out. James's voice was cold as he stood in our marble foyer, casually swirling whiskey in a crystal glass. Your things are already packed. I stared at the Louis Vuitton suitcases lined up by the door, the ones he bought me last Christmas when everything still seemed perfect. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. So that's it? After 8 years of marriage, you're just throwing me out. He smirked, taking another sip. Come on, Emma, let's not make this dramatic. We both know this marriage has served its purpose. Your inheritance helped build ClearTech into what it is today. Now that we're going public, I need someone more suitable by my side, someone who understands the tech world. My name is Emma Chen, and at 34, I was watching my life crumble around me. 8 years ago, I'd married James believing in love and forever. He was brilliant but struggling, working on a startup he swore would change the world. When my parents died in a car accident 2 years into our marriage, leaving me their life savings and family business shares worth $3 million, I didn't hesitate to invest it all in his dream. You mean someone like Melissa? I asked, thinking of his 25-year-old head of marketing who'd been spending more and more time at our house lately. The way she looked at him during dinner parties, how they always seemed to be having late meetings. James's smile widened. Melissa understands vision. She gets what it takes to build something revolutionary. You, he gestured dismissively with his glass. You were great for the early days. The supportive wife, the generous investor. But ClearTech is worth $100 million now. We're playing in the big leagues. I looked around our mansion. The sweeping staircase, the chandelier that cost more than most cars. The art I carefully selected to make this place feel like home. All of it built with my family's money, my trust, my love. The board meets tomorrow to finalize the IPO, James continued, checking his Rolex. Another gift bought with my inheritance. Melissa and I need to prep. So if we could wrap this up. I walked to the suitcases, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt heavy with 6 years of memories. The dinner parties I'd hosted to help him network, the nights I'd stayed up listening to his ideas, the vacations we'd canceled because he needed to work. I believed in him completely, had been so proud to help build his dream. You know what's funny? I said, turning to face him. You think you've won, that you've played this perfectly. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Haven't I? ClearTech is about to go public. I'm about to become one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country. And you? He shrugged. You'll get whatever the prenup stipulates, which, if I remember correctly, isn't much. I smiled, thinking of everything he didn't know. The quiet moves I'd made over the past year as I watched him grow more distant, more arrogant. The careful planning that would turn his smug grin into shock. Good luck with the IPO, James, I said, grabbing my suitcases. I'm sure it'll be interesting. His confidence faltered for just a moment. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. I walked out without looking back, the heavy door closing behind me with a final thud. What James didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant to even consider, was that I wasn't as naive as he thought. Growing up in a business family had taught me to always protect myself. While he was busy building his empire and courting Melissa, I'd been watching, learning, and preparing. The inheritance he used to build ClearTech? I had documentation for every penny, dated, notarized, and safely stored with my lawyer. The early company contracts, all carefully preserved, showing my role as more than just a silent investor. The long hours he claimed to be working, I had proof of much more interesting activities. But my real insurance policy was something far more valuable, something that would make tomorrow's board meeting very interesting indeed. I checked into the Four Seasons, a small indulgence I planned ahead for. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Lauren. Are you okay? Did you do it? It's done, I replied. He kicked me out just like we expected. Melissa's already moving in. That smug bastard, she texted back. He has no idea what's coming, does he? I smiled, thinking of the documents safely stored in my laptop. Documents that would turn James's perfect plan upside down. No, I wrote. He doesn't. That night, I sat in my hotel room watching the city lights twinkle below. 6 years ago, James had been a struggling entrepreneur with big dreams. I believed in those dreams, had wanted to be part of building something meaningful. The $3 million from my parents had seemed like fate, a way to honor their memory by helping create something amazing. I remember the day I transferred the money to ClearTech's account. James had hugged me tight, promising we'd build an empire together. You and me against the world, he'd said. Partners in everything. Now here I was, kicked out of my own house so he could move in his girlfriend. The wife who funded his success discarded like yesterday's news. But James had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. Growing up watching my father run his business, I'd learned that trust was good, but documentation was better. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email from my lawyer, Sandra. Everything's in place for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we move forward, there's no going back. I thought about James's smug smile as he dismissed me, about all the nights I'd spent alone while he was working late with Melissa, about how he thought he could use me and throw me away. Unsure, I replied, let's show them what I'm really worth. Tomorrow, James would learn that his perfect plan had one fatal flaw. Me, and I was done being underestimated. As I walked into ClearTech's gleaming headquarters the next morning, the security guard did a double take. Mrs. Chen. Mr. Wilson said that I wouldn't be coming in anymore. I smiled, sliding my still valid ID card across the desk. He was mistaken about a lot of things, Tom. The elevator ride to the top floor felt surreal. How many times had I visited James here, bringing him lunch during late nights or attending company events? The modern art on the walls, the sleek furniture in the reception area, all of it chosen with my inheritance money. I could hear voices from the boardroom as I approached. James was mid-speech, his voice carrying that confident tone I'd once found so charming. Which is why this IPO will position ClearTech as the leading innovator in cloud security, our proprietary technology. I pushed open the door, and the room fell silent. 12 board members turned to stare at me, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. James stood at the head of the table, his presentation frozen on the screen behind him. Next to him, Melissa's perfectly made-up face paled. Emma. James recovered quickly, his smile tight. This is a private board meeting. You shouldn't be here. I took a seat at the far end of the table, placing my laptop in front of me. Actually, I have every right to be here. As a major stakeholder in ClearTech, I think the board should hear what I have to say before voting on the IPO. One of the board members, an older man named Richard, leaned forward. Mrs. Wilson, we were under the impression that you had no official role in the company. It's Ms. Chen. I corrected him, opening my laptop, and that impression was incorrect. In fact, there's quite a lot about ClearTech that needs clarification. James's facade cracked slightly. Emma, don't do this. Whatever you're thinking. I connected my laptop to the presentation screen, and the room gasped. There on display was the original investment agreement, $3 million transferred from my personal account to start ClearTech, with clear terms about my role as a founding investor. As you can see, I said calmly, my investment wasn't just a wife supporting her husband. It was a formal business arrangement with specific conditions about my involvement in major company decisions, like, say, an IPO. The board members shifted uncomfortably, several of them shooting questioning looks at James. He had always portrayed ClearTech as his sole creation, conveniently leaving out the fact that his wife's inheritance had made it all possible. That was years ago, James said dismissively. The company has grown far beyond that initial investment. True, I nodded, clicking to the next slide, which is why I found it interesting that you've been systematically erasing my contributions from company records. These are the original documents, and these, I split screen to show altered versions, are what you submitted to the SEC for the IPO filing. The room erupted in murmurs. Document falsification in an IPO filing was serious, the kind of thing that could derail the entire process and trigger investigations. This is ridiculous, Melissa spoke up, her hand possessively on James's arm. You're just bitter because my husband used my family's money to build this company, then tried to push me out when he thought he didn't need me anymore. I interrupted. No, Melissa, I'm not bitter. I'm just well prepared. I clicked to the next slide, and James's face went ash white. There on the screen were bank statements showing systematic fund diversions from ClearTech's accounts to offshore holdings. Millions of dollars moved quietly over the past year. Would anyone like to explain these transactions? I asked innocently. Because I'm very curious about why company funds were being moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands right before the IPO announcement. Richard, the board member who'd spoken earlier, stood up abruptly. Mr. Wilson, is this accurate? James tugged at his collar, his cold demeanor cracking. These are complex financial arrangements for tax purposes. completely standard. Standard? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you told Melissa when you promised her shares from these accounts? When you planned to cash out together after the IPO? Melissa jumped up, her chair scraping against the floor. How did you? No. I finished for her. Let's just say you should be more careful about what you discuss over company email, especially when the company's security system was partly funded by the person you're planning to betray. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Several members were on their phones, presumably calling their lawyers. Others were demanding immediate explanations from James, who stood there looking like his perfect world was crumbling around him. This is a simple choice, I said, raising my voice above the commotion. Either we postpone the IPO and restructure the company leadership to reflect its true ownership, or I take this evidence to the SEC. Your call. James stormed around the table toward me, his face contorted with rage. You manipulative bitch, he hissed under his breath. You're trying to destroy everything I built. No, James, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. I'm taking back what's mine, what we built together, before you decided to throw me away. The board quickly called for an emergency recess. As people filed out of the room, many of them already on their phones with crisis managers and lawyers, I packed up my laptop calmly. Everything I'd shown them was just the tip of the iceberg. I had more evidence, more proof of James's deceptions, safely backed up and ready to deploy if needed. Richard, the senior board member, approached me as I stood to leave. Ms. Chen, I think we need to have a longer conversation about your role in ClearTech. Perhaps over lunch? I smiled, shouldering my bag. I'd like that. I have quite a few ideas about the company's future. As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of James and Melissa in heated discussion, their perfect plan falling apart around them. He looked up as I passed, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. This was just the beginning. James had thought he could discard me without consequences, but he was about to learn just how expensive that mistake would be. The weeks following the board meeting were a whirlwind of legal negotiations, emergency board sessions, and company restructuring. I watched from my temporary office on the 19th floor, not quite the penthouse suite where James still sat, but close enough to keep an eye on things. The IPO had been postponed indefinitely. After my revelations, the board wasn't taking any chances. They'd hired independent auditors to go through every transaction, every document, every decision made in the past 6 years. What they found made my evidence look tame in comparison. They've uncovered at least $12 million in questionable transactions, Sandra, my lawyer, told me one morning as we reviewed the latest findings. James wasn't just planning to cash out with Melissa. He was setting up a parallel company structure. He was going to use the IPO money to start fresh, leaving ClearTech as an empty shell. I sipped my coffee, looking out over the city skyline. And Melissa? Any word from her legal team? Sandra smirked. She's singing like a canary, turned over everything. Emails, texts, recorded conversations. Apparently, she's not as loyal to James now that his perfect plan has fallen apart. I wasn't surprised. Melissa had always been ambitious, but her loyalty extended only as far as her own interests. Once she realized James couldn't deliver the wealthy future he promised, she'd switched sides quickly. The press had been having a field day with the story. Tech CEO's IPO dreams crumble amid fraud allegations, read one headline. ClearTech founder's wife exposes million-dollar deception, screamed another. James' reputation in the tech world, once golden, was now thoroughly tarnished. But I wasn't interested in revenge, I wanted justice. The board had been surprisingly receptive to my proposals for restructuring the company. With James's credibility destroyed and the threat of SEC investigations looming, they were eager to find a stable path forward. The board meeting's in an hour, Sandra reminded me, gathering her papers. Are you ready? I nodded, straightening my blazer. More than ready. The boardroom looked different now. The same sleek table, the same floor-to-ceiling windows. But the energy had changed. James sat at the far end, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained anger. His lawyer whispered something in his ear as I took my seat. Richard called the meeting to order. As you all know, we're here to finalize the leadership restructuring of ClearTech. Following the independent audit and extensive legal review, the board has prepared a resolution. I kept my expression neutral as he read through the terms. James would step down as CEO, though he retained a minority stake in the company. The offshore accounts would be frozen and investigated. And most importantly, I would be installed as executive chairperson, with final say over all major company decisions. This is insane, James burst out, standing up. You're giving her control of my company? Our company, I corrected him quietly, built with my family's money, my support, and my trust. Money you tried to steal, support you abused, and trust you betrayed. The board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up to defend James. They'd all seen the evidence, all realized how close they'd come to being implicated in his schemes. The resolution is fair, Richard said firmly. Ms. Chen's investment and early involvement were instrumental in building ClearTech. Her recent actions protected not just her interests, but those of every shareholder and employee. The vote was quick and decisive. 10 in favor, 2 abstaining, none opposed. Just like that, control of ClearTech passed to me. As people filed out of the room, James approached me, his face dark with fury. Congratulations, he spat. You've destroyed everything I worked for. I stood up slowly, gathering my things. No, James, I saved what we built together. You're the one who tried to destroy it with greed and lies. You think you can run this company, he sneered. You don't know the first thing about tech. I know about loyalty, I replied. About building trust and keeping it. The technology might be complex, but the principles of good business are simple, something my father taught me long ago. I walked to the door, then turned back for one last look at the man I'd once loved so completely.
Now that the troublesome situation has passed, we can relax and enjoy ourselves. He whispered these words to his niece's ear. The cause of the trouble was none other than his daughter. I had to leave home abruptly for a business trip. Despite my concerns about being away from my daughter for several days, John reassured me and bid me farewell, urging me to go in peace. My daughter and John usually spent quality time together, so I felt at ease leaving her in his care. However, recently, my daughter's behavior had taken a peculiar turn. In hindsight, I should have delved deeper into these feelings. Mommy, don't go to work. My daughter clung to my leg, reluctant to let go. Unfortunately, I failed to recognize her desperate plea for help. Feeling like a failure as a mother, little did I know that John would lock my daughter in the storage room and embark on a trip with his niece. Forgiving John for the irreversible harm he caused to my daughter and niece is something I can never do. My name is Sherry. I married John the same year I became pregnant. Our daughter, Samantha, is now 5 years old. Our paths crossed through a common friend's introduction, a rather ordinary occurrence at the time. John, who had a fondness for children, worked at a toy manufacturing company, while I had just been chosen for a work project. Despite being engrossed in our respective careers, marriage was not on our minds. However, upon discovering my pregnancy with Samantha, everything changed. Having the baby meant taking a maternity leave and facing potential sidelining from the project. Witnessing similar situations at my workplace, I felt disheartened about my professional future. Yet John consoled me, expressing his willingness to quit his job and become a full-time stay-at-home dad. He had taken his current job with the hope that our future kids would play with the toys he helped create. John had already played a role in developing several products, some of which were already on the market. His dream was for me to fulfill my potential. These words prompted me to decide to have our daughter. I explained the situation to my company and returned to work 3 months after giving birth. Despite a slight gap, I managed to stay on the project, gaining valuable experience. Returning to work so soon after childbirth was challenging, but the thought of John and Samantha waiting at home fueled my determination. Currently leading a newly launched project, I strive to leave work on time by working remotely during weekdays. Although weekends, work, and business trips are sometimes inevitable, my daughter remains supportive, encouraging me with strong words. The concept of a full-time stay-at-home dad was not fully understood by society. But as a family, we harmonized our roles. leading to a happy life. One day, my sister-in-law discussed her divorce with us. Her husband, 10 years her senior, had frequent clashes due to differing opinions. The final straw was when he raised his hand against her. The divorce brought relief to my sister-in-law, who no longer had to witness her daughter Lily cry. Lily, an 11-year-old, had experienced the violence firsthand, prompting the decision to divorce. John, with his usual sense of humor, offered support, jokingly saying, "If you ever need anything, just say the word. I'm always home." Although it brought laughter, we nodded in agreement with John's sentiment. His words played a crucial role when John decided to quit his job and become a full-time stay-at-home dad. It's not about being a man or a woman these days. Whoever can do it should. Without my sister-in-law's support, we might not have maintained a good relationship with our in-laws. Our happiness owes part of its existence to her. Expressing gratitude, she mentioned considering a move to our neighborhood. We welcomed the idea, ensuring her that it wouldn't be a bother. Facing the need to leave the rental apartment shared with her ex-husband, she pondered returning to her in-laws' house an hour away. However, this would complicate her commute, and Lily would have to change schools. Fortunately, our house was within Lily's school district. They found a vacant apartment nearby and decided to move in. Suggesting that we look after Lily after school until her mother finished work, John and I agreed. Despite my sister-in-law's initial concerns about being overprotective, our proximity allowed us to keep a close eye on Lily, making John's role vital in the process. With Lily in our care during her mother's working hours, we began a new chapter in our family life. Living nearby, my daughter and her cousin quickly adapted to the routine. Initially, everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, my daughter's sudden resistance to being apart from me raised questions. Accustomed to seeing me off to work from a young age, I assumed she was comfortable with the routine. Was she feeling lonely, or was there another source of anxiety? Puzzled by her behavior, I attempted reassurance. "Mommy's just going to work. I'll be back tonight." Despite my attempts, my daughter clung tighter, revealing her inner turmoil. Concerned, I discussed the situation with John, who optimistically suggested that perhaps something happened at preschool. Assuring me that Lily's presence would provide comfort, John believed they might share secrets and alleviate any concerns my daughter had. Hoping this was the case, I refrained from pressing my daughter for answers. My daughter and Lily formed a close bond, with Lily treating her like a little sister. Observing their camaraderie, I believed my daughter's behavior was a passing phase. As my workload approached a lull, I planned to take leave and spend quality time with my daughter soon. However, unexpectedly, a business trip arose, requiring my absence for 5 days. Despite concerns, John's reassuring words encouraged me to proceed with the trip. Packed and ready, I left home 2 days later, with Lily visiting at the time. John, my daughter, and Lily saw me off with smiles. Little did I know that, at that very moment, events were unfolding at home beyond my expectations. John, exhibiting signs of departure, raised anxious questions from Lily. "Isn't Samantha coming with us?" John, to ease Lily's worries, fabricated a story about Samantha joining me on the business trip upon my return. Convinced by the tale, Lily accepted the explanation, and John directed my daughter to find a non-existent item in the storage room before my return. Samantha, believing her father's words, ventured into the storage room. Unbeknownst to her, John closed the door from the outside. Oblivious to the unfolding situation, my daughter did not notice the door being shut. John, muttering about the nuisance being gone, left with Lily for their trip, unknowingly leaving my daughter trapped in the storage room. Upon John's return 4 days later, he cheerfully chatted with a saddened Lily. Blissfully unaware of the events in his absence, John was shocked when he saw the storage shed and remembered he had left his daughter behind. Panicking, Lily rushed to the shed, where an unidentifiable liquid seeped out from under the door. John, attempting to stop Lily, confessed the truth about leaving Samantha behind. Lily, in shock, tried to open the shed door, only to be halted by John. The revelation left her devastated. The realization that Samantha was left in the shed, contrary to what John had assured her, prompted Lily to blame him. John, trembling and admitting his mistake, faced Lily's accusations. Witnessing this, I finally spoke up, questioning John's actions. My voice, cold and filled with anger, sent chills down my spine. Even my daughter, standing beside me, mirrored the intense emotions. John, turning around to face us, was frozen in shock. Sherry. Contrary to John's astonishment, Lily burst into tears upon seeing Samantha. Hugging Samantha tightly, Lily expressed relief that she was safe. Samantha, avoiding eye contact with John, reciprocated Lily's embrace. I couldn't help but wonder about the emotional toll these events had taken on the innocent children. I stood protectively in front of my daughter Samantha and niece Lily, yet John showed faint concern. "I'm glad you're safe," he muttered towards Samantha. "Glad she's safe after you left her behind." "What are you saying now?" "Samantha said she wanted to be with you." "And why are you here, Sherry? Weren't you on a business trip? You were supposed to return tomorrow." "Oh, so you thought you'd be back before I got home." "Could it be that you often leave Samantha like this when I'm away?" John fell silent at my words. His silence was more affirming than anything else. "I've already heard the story from Samantha. I'll be hearing it from Lily as well." Turning to Lily, who was still embracing Samantha, she met my gaze firmly and nodded as if she had made a decision. The fact that I was able to rescue my daughter Samantha was a stroke of sheer luck. The thought of what could have happened if my business trip dates hadn't changed sends shivers down my spine. On the day I was supposed to leave, I indeed boarded the Amtrak. However, I received a sudden notification that the trip was canceled, so I got off the train mid-journey and returned home. Since the trip was called off, I could return home directly, arriving earlier than my usual time. Finally, I would have a chance to talk with Samantha. I took a taxi from the station, rushing home. As I got out of the taxi and approached the front door, I heard a voice calling, "Mommy." Thinking Samantha had seen me and was running towards me, I turned towards the voice, only to be shocked. Samantha's voice was coming from inside the storage shed. "Samantha?" In a panic, I'd opened the shed door to find my daughter there, drenched in sweat and sobbing uncontrollably. At her feet lay the burst remnants of a water-filled bouncy ball I had given her. This toy was developed by John when he was still working at the toy manufacturer. I had given it to Samantha, hoping to cheer her up when she first started showing signs of distress. Apparently, she panicked when she realized the door was shut, either throwing or stepping on the ball, causing it to burst. The liquid seeping out of the shed was from this ruptured bouncy ball. The floor was also scattered with Samantha's old clothes. "What happened? Why are you in here?" I hugged my crying daughter and asked her. What she told me then ignited a fury in me, the likes of which I had never felt before in my life. "Samantha said you asked her to look for my jewelry. She's deeply shocked both from being left behind and being locked in." "Locked in?" "The door wasn't locked. I thought she would come out on her own." Being suddenly shut in is frightening even for adults. It's not surprising she panicked and couldn't open it. And I've heard about the usual situation. Now I finally understand why Samantha started acting out. My husband would have noticed the cause. After all, he was the cause of it. After we started looking after Lily, John began to favor her, neglecting Samantha. My daughter felt increasingly lonely as John paid attention only to Lily. But Samantha, caring for me and my busy schedule, could only express her feelings in such a way. It seems she also knew Lily was troubled by John's behavior. The photo of them whispering might have been taken while they were discussing this. Samantha really wanted to talk to me about Lily and hoped I could help in some way. However, Samantha didn't have the right words to accurately convey this. Unsure of how to express it to me, Samantha's words to me were hesitant. Yet she cared deeply for Lily, despite feeling lonely herself. What a kind-hearted child she is. After hearing from Samantha, I immediately called John, but he didn't answer. No matter how many times I called, usually he would call back right away, and it was unusual for him not to answer. Something was wrong. Believing this, I reached out to my sister-in-law. During this conversation, I learned a shocking fact. John had told her he was going on a trip with Samantha and Lily. John had contacted my sister-in-law as soon as he found out about my business trip. Sherry is going on a long business trip. During that time, I thought of taking Samantha and Lily on a trip because Samantha might feel lonely. What do you think? My sister-in-law was also busy with work and felt guilty for not being able to spend much time with Lily. John lied that Samantha and Lily wanted to go to a theme park, and my sister-in-law agreed, thinking it would be good for Lily. Of course, I hadn't heard anything about this plan from John. Hearing this, I felt as if the blood had drained from my face. Could John have been planning to leave Samantha alone at home during this trip? I informed my sister-in-law that Samantha was actually at home. When I mentioned that I couldn't reach John, she said she would try calling him herself, and we ended the call. I thought something was off and checked around the house, and I was shocked. There were lots of prepared meals in the fridge, and the water heater for the bath was left on. Could it be that he prepared all this so Samantha could stay alone? That is, John had planned to leave our 5-year-old daughter alone for 4 days with just these arrangements. My sister-in-law managed to reach John, who was apparently at the theme park with Lily, and casually said, "I'll have to hang up. Our turn for the attraction is coming." She also received pictures of Lily alone at the park, confirming Lily's safety. Angry yet relieved about Lily's safety, my sister-in-law and I decided to wait for John and Lily's return. John, perhaps as an alibi, had sent me a picture of Samantha and Lily, which must have been taken previously at our house. My sister-in-law received photos of Lily playing at the theme park. There was even a fake story of the two having fun together to pretend for it. And so John, believing he had fooled us, returned home in high spirits, having completely forgotten about the daughter he left behind. Why did my husband want to go on a trip with only his niece so desperately? Why John wanted to go on a trip only with Lily was beyond understanding. His affection for his niece was one thing, but his actions were abnormal. I wasn't the only one who thought so. Really, what were you thinking? Leaving your own daughter behind to go on a trip with your niece? That's abnormal, sis. Why are you here? I've heard everything from Cher. My sister-in-law burst in out of breath, likely having run here straight from work. Seeing her, Lily left Samantha and ran to her aunt. "Mom, Lily, I'm sorry." Then, for the first time, Lily told us everything about what my husband had done. As soon as we started looking after Lily, John began to pay attention only to her. According to what Samantha told me, it appeared so to Samantha. But in reality, it was more distressing for Lily. John had an unusual obsession with taking photos of Lily. At first, Lily agreed to John's request for photos, believing they were to be sent to her mother, and she smiled for the camera. However, over time, John's behavior began to escalate. He started making specific demands for poses, and Lily began to feel uncomfortable. But when Lily once refused and said no, John threatened her, saying he would tell her mother, making it seem like he was blaming Lily for not complying. "Lily is a naughty girl for not listening. Maybe I should tell your mom that we can't look after you anymore. She would surely be troubled then." Manipulating Lily's desire not to upset her mom, John continued to take her pictures, and eventually he took her on a trip, just the two of them. I really didn't want to go on the trip. It was creepy when he held my hand. "Hey, Lily, that's not true, right? You used to be happy with me, asking me to pick you up." Hearing this, my sister-in-law yelled, "How old was she, you're talking?" and hugged Lily tightly again. Lily, like Samantha, had been enduring John's behavior, not wanting to worry her aunt, and John had misunderstood this as Lily being fond of him. My sister-in-law tearfully apologized to Lily for not sensing the danger and agreeing to the trip so casually. She regretted her complacency for always having John look after Lily. "I'm sorry, Lily. If only I had been more careful." Lily shook her head in her mother's arms, said in a trembling voice that she never wanted to see John again. John began to panic pathetically at this. Don't say that, Lily. I just wanted to show you affection. Stay away from Lily from now on. But then my sister-in-law demanded he delete the photos and snatched his phone from him. In his panicked state, however, upon seeing the photo folder, she was lost for words. There was an abnormal amount of photos of Lily saved. Lily's expressions in the photos seemed like forced smiles, but it was clear she was frightened. In retrospect, all the photos John sent never had Lily looking directly at the camera. John must have noticed the change in Lily's expressions too. That's why John only sent photos where Lily's expressions weren't clear, yet he let his desires run wild and took Lily away. Disgusting. I felt nauseated by John's abnormal behavior. My sister-in-law holding the phone tightly seemed frozen in place. We both shielded our daughters behind us, confronting John. There was no way I could forgive him for leaving Samantha behind, and I didn't want him near our daughters ever again. All feelings of affection had vanished in an instant. It's not like that. Listen to me. I love Lily, and of course, I love Samantha too. John continued to make excuses, only further frightening Samantha and Lily. I presented him with the divorce papers I had prepared during his trip, gathered our belongings, took Samantha, and left the house. I couldn't bear to share the same air with him for another moment. My sister-in-law and Lily followed us out. All that followed was my husband's sad screams. Afterward, I took my sister-in-law and Lily to their parents' house and informed them about John's behavior. When I mentioned leaving him with the divorce papers, my in-laws promised to handle everything from there. They assured us they would prevent John from approaching us again. Lily finally seemed to find some peace upon hearing their words. My sister-in-law and Lily decided to stay with my in-laws for the time being, planning to sort out work and school later. Though it likely meant Lily would have to change schools, we couldn't discount the possibility of John lurking around her school route. Samantha and I decided to return to my parents' home too. During John's trip, I had been managing work, household chores, and childcare alone. Thankfully, Samantha was a resilient child, and I felt confident that we could manage well on our own. Living without John, just the two of us seemed entirely feasible. Those hellish 4 days indeed contributed to my newfound confidence. For a while, we'll live at my parents' house, grateful for their kindness. But I plan to move closer to my workplace before Samantha starts elementary school. We started our new lives, but John was still stuck in the past. Thanks to my in-laws, I was able to finalize the divorce from John without ever having to see him. But he continued to call afterward and even showed up at my parents' house, despite being cut off by my in-laws from any contact with me, my daughter, and the residents of his parents' home. John pathetically tried to seek reconciliation. I can't imagine a life without Sher and Samantha. His words only instilled fear in me. I asked my parents to contact the police, who came and took away John, who was screaming at our doorstep. He was served a restraining order by the police and finally seemed to understand he was alone. All this destruction was his doing, and it was too late for regrets. I wondered how John, having been a stay-at-home dad, planned to live since then, but that was no longer my concern. Samantha had been down for a while after the incident, but she's finally starting to smile again. Though divorced from John, we still keep in touch with my sister-in-law and Lily, and their smiles are returning too, to overwrite the traumatic memories of the theme park with Lily. We are planning a trip there, just the 4 of us. I'm looking forward to creating many happy memories for Samantha and Lily.
My name is Meline, and I'm 38 years old. I married my husband, Kenneth, who is 4 years older than me, 8 years ago. My life took a dramatic turn when my beloved father passed away due to illness, leaving me with a substantial inheritance. I used this fortune to purchase a new house, which I adore. The scent of fresh wood brings me comfort. I often think that my father would be pleased to see this new home. Our old house, where my father lived alone after my marriage and my mother's passing, was just a 15-minute walk from our apartment. Following my father's fall a few years ago, he passed away recently. With the inheritance, I decided to demolish the old family home and build a new one. I've always believed that even though the old house is gone, the happy memories will remain in our hearts. Kenneth often echoed my father's words about building a new home as a way to start afresh. At first, I thought Kenneth was just trying to cheer me up, but it soon became clear that this wasn't the case. Kenneth, I need you to fill out the divorce papers and submit them to the appropriate place. Divorce papers? What do you mean? I asked, bewildered. Yes, exactly that. We're getting divorced. I want you to submit the divorce papers. This is not a joke. I never intended to live with you in this house. This new home, built with your father's inheritance, is meant for my mistress. She and I will be living here together. His words were astonishing. Mistress, you've been cheating on me. Yes, if I had met her before I met you, I wouldn't have married you. She's different, cute, kind, and genuinely loves me. We've been together for about 6 months. She approached me knowing I was married, but she didn't mind. She's happy just being with me and says the sweetest things. I should never have married someone as serious and uptight as you. Coming home to you was never enjoyable. He continued, I've decided to take this house as alimony. After 8 years of marriage without children, what benefit is there in staying married to you? I was overwhelmed and sought comfort from Kenneth, only to be met with unexpected blame. You're acting like a victim, but this is all your fault. If you had fulfilled your role, no one would stray. It's your responsibility that men are drawn to other women. You're to blame for the affair, the divorce, and losing the new house. It's wrong to play the victim or to resent me for this, he asserted. He claimed his infidelity was my fault and then handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked, puzzled. It's your alimony. I don't want any hassle later, so I'm giving it to you now. Be thankful. Inside the envelope was $1,000. As he took the new house, built with my father's inheritance, to live with his mistress, he tossed me the money. I calmly returned the envelope. Fine, I accept the divorce. If you don't love me, there's no point in staying married. I don't need the money. He seemed taken aback by how easily I accepted the divorce. Well, if you say so. Just don't ask for it back later. Kenneth packed his things and left a few days later, taking the keys to the new house with him. However, shortly after, my now ex-husband frantically called me, clearly agitated. What did you do? The police came to the house, talking about warrants and charges of trespassing. What's going on? According to him, the police had arrived while he was with his mistress at the new house. Hello, we're the police. You understand why we're here, right? The police? What for? Well, this is your ex-wife's house. Entering with a stolen key is illegal, both theft and trespassing. You understand? Kenneth, shocked and bewildered, looked at his mistress, who was equally confused. What's going on? Isn't this your house? You said you wanted to show me. Be quiet and stay out of this. Sorry to interrupt your domestic dispute, but we have a warrant. Could we discuss this at the station? Caught between the police and his mistress, Kenneth called me in a panic. Why is this happening all of a sudden? What did you do? I haven't done much. I simply reported that my house keys were stolen and that strangers were in my home. It's only natural to call the police. I promptly filed the divorce papers, reverted to my maiden name, Milline Baker, and reported the situation to the police. This is my house. Didn't you agree to give it to us as alimony? Kenneth argued. I never agreed to that, I countered. It's convenient for you to twist things to fit your narrative. Are you joking? How can you think that house is yours? I'm the one on the house contract. I paid for it with my inheritance from my father. Plus, I own the land. But your father said it was for us, Kenneth protested. That was when you were my husband. Now we're divorced and strangers. Why would you think it's your land? My father had transferred the land rights to me when he fell ill to prevent any complications if something happened to him. He must have anticipated a situation like this. Maybe that's why he advised demolishing the old house and building a new one. Money can be taken easily, but a house, now that's different. Kenneth's calm demeanor suddenly made sense. So you were planning this all along? I did nothing. You misunderstood everything and left. It was almost amusing watching you walk away, clueless. Too bad you were about to be happy with your mistress. Stop being ridiculous. You blamed me for the affair, the divorce, and losing the house. How does it feel now, stuck between your girlfriend and the police? Kenneth could only groan in response. Hating me is misplaced. This situation is entirely your fault. Ever heard of you reap what you sow? This is what you deserve. As soon as I said this, Kenneth exploded in rage on the phone, shouting accusations. Then suddenly, his voice faded. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Smith's ex-wife? He's causing a disturbance at your house. Could we have a word, please?" It seemed a police officer had taken over the call. I explained the situation to the officer, who sympathetically acknowledged how tough it must have been. Later, Kenneth and his mistress were taken to the station. Kenneth continued to insist that the house was given to him by his ex-wife and that it wasn't trespassing. His mistress, genuinely surprised, stated that she had no knowledge of trespassing. Kenneth claimed he had evidence to support his case and presented it at the station. Ultimately, the mistress's statement was deemed credible, and she was released with a warning. Kenneth, however, was found guilty of theft and trespassing and was fined. The issue now was that Kenneth had named me as his guarantor upon his release, likely because he didn't want his strict parents to know. The officer, clearly exasperated, informed me of the situation. "Why should I be his guarantor? We're divorced and strangers now," I replied firmly. "I have no connection with Mr. Smith anymore, so I refuse. You say he has no one else to turn to, but his parents live nearby. Please contact them." The officer relayed this to Kenneth, who was evidently frustrated. His parents were already aware of our divorce due to his infidelity, but they were unaware of his attempt to take the new house. The police call had informed them of the entire situation. Reluctantly, I visited Kenneth's parents' house after they requested more details. I knocked on the door and apologized. "I'm sorry I couldn't explain the situation earlier." "No need to apologize," his mother replied. "It's all my foolish son's fault. But did you know about this?" "No, about what?" I asked. "Well, my son is here with his mistress, a much younger woman. We let them in to talk, but I'm not sure what he's thinking." To my surprise, Kenneth had brought his mistress into the living room. The scene was as described: Kenneth, the young woman, and my stern-looking father-in-law, Tham. "Tom, it's been a while. I'm sorry for the delay," I said. "Milan, thanks for coming. I apologize for calling you after the divorce, but I've heard Kenneth's side of the story. However, I can't fully trust someone who's been arrested for trespassing. Can you tell me your side?" I recounted everything as requested. Throughout my explanation, Kenneth and his mistress kept their heads bowed, avoiding eye contact. "What were you thinking, trying to take Milan's new house? Are you insane?" Kenneth's father demanded. "It's not that simple," Kenneth interjected. "We resolved this between us." "Resolved? How is that possible?" Tom retorted. "Your story is completely different from hers." Apparently, Kenneth spun his own version before I arrived. "What were you told?" I asked. Kenneth's father said, "He claimed you willingly transferred the house to him, then changed your story and reported him, leading to his wrongful arrest." "Really? He said that?" I was incredulous. "It's true that when we discussed the house, I didn't object. But that doesn't mean I agreed to transfer ownership. To suddenly claim the house as yours and report it, it's beyond comprehension." "I'm so sorry, Milan, for having such a son," Kenneth's mother said. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm telling the truth." Milan wasn't agreeing. She was too stunned to speak. "How could you misunderstand and still claim to be her husband?" I nodded in agreement with Tom. Despite everything, Kenneth continued to make excuses. "Anyway, you never mentioned owning the land. If I'd known, I wouldn't have done this." "If I had told you, you'd have found another excuse to do the same thing," I replied. "How can you say that? Were you spending a lot on her?" Kenneth asked, gesturing towards his mistress. "No. Why would you think that?" I responded. "Right after our divorce, I happened to run into one of your colleagues. When I mentioned the divorce, I received some shocking information that left me reeling." "Figures," Kenneth's colleague said, looking uncomfortable. "No offense, but I thought it might happen." "What do you mean? Didn't he tell you?" I asked. The colleague shifted uncomfortably before spilling everything. "I should have mentioned this sooner, but I wasn't in a position to tell you. Kenneth has been bragging about his mistress, a woman 20 years younger. He was showing off, buying her expensive bags and jewelry. He said he didn't know how to contact you to inform you. He's been very open about his plans." The colleague continued. "Kenneth even mentioned a decisive conversation he had. He said he was planning to divorce you to marry his mistress. Apparently, her father passed away, and they're building a new house with the inheritance. Kenneth planned to claim the house in the divorce. He said, once the house is built, I'll divorce Milan and somehow claim it. No matter the opposition, I'll get it, and then my young new wife and I will live in the big house. Kenneth had been showering his mistress with gifts for some time, it seemed. The house built with my father's inheritance was intended as a grand gesture to propose to her. I've heard everything. Do you still insist you did nothing wrong? I asked, sweating with frustration. Kenneth stammered, well, yes, I bought her gifts. So what? I used my own money and gave Meline her living expenses. She's not my destined partner. This woman is. I brought her here today to announce our marriage. Are you out of your mind? His parents exclaimed in shock. The most surprising response came from the mistress. Marry you? Did I ever say that? We're not even dating. What do you mean? Kenneth asked, bewildered. Exactly that, she replied. I'm not in a relationship with him. I only approached him for a sugar daddy arrangement. I told you from the start that I was looking for someone for that kind of arrangement, and even married men were acceptable. You agreed to it initially, but now? What are you talking about? That's creepy, the mistress said. Kenneth went pale at this revelation, unable to speak. I asked, so why did you come here with him today? The mistress explained, I came to ask for more time to pay the alimony. I knew he was married, so it's an affair, and I'm prepared to pay the alimony. But I'm still a student. A student. How old are you? Tom, Kenneth's father, interjected, looking bewildered. I'm 22. I lost my parents early and have been doing sugar dating to pay for college. I sold all the gifts for living expenses, so I don't have savings. I can show you my bank account. I've just secured a job and can start paying alimony from my salary. So, you came here to ask me to wait for the alimony? I asked. Yes, that's right, she confirmed. Kenneth, who had been listening in silence, erupted in anger. Didn't you hear her? Unfortunately, she never intended to marry or even date you. But that's separate from the alimony you owe. And what about saying you wanted a house? The mistress responded, I meant I'd want a house someday when I marry. It wasn't about marrying you. What? Kenneth exclaimed. I was suddenly taken to that house, thinking it was yours. Then the police came, and I learned it was actually your wife's. She bowed deeply to me, indicating that all of this was due to Kenneth's misunderstandings. Kenneth stood dazed, clearly in shock. All right, I said, if you promise to pay the alimony properly, I'll wait for the payment. But promise me no more sugar dating. It might not end simply next time. I promise I'll never do it again, she said earnestly. I turned to Kenneth. Expect a claim for alimony from me without delay. Alimony? What are you talking about? Kenneth asked, taken aback and not expecting to pay alimony himself. You said you didn't need alimony when you returned the money, I reminded him. I gave you $1,000 and now you're asking for more? That's not what we agreed on, Kenneth protested. I don't recall any agreement, I said. You returned the $1,000 I gave you saying you didn't need it. What I meant was that I didn't need such a trivial amount for alimony. Do you have any idea how much alimony for infidelity is? It's $11,000, I replied, and you're also at fault for not having children in the 8 years we were married. At that moment, a loud slap echoed through the room. Someone asked, What are you doing, Kenneth? He held his cheek, clearly stunned by the impact. I asked, Are you serious? Do you really think her inability to have children is her fault? Enough with your jokes, Dad, Kenneth's father interrupted. Don't tell me you're blaming Meline for your affair too. Well, that's how it is, Kenneth said. I should have never married her. It's like fraud. How could you think that? I challenged. Your parents wanted grandchildren. If she couldn't get pregnant, they thought it was better to split up. That's why I chose her. If you truly believe that, Kenneth's father said, then we must have raised you wrong. It took your mother 10 years to conceive you. She was heartbroken hearing about others having children quickly and went through intense treatments until you were born. Did you think pregnancy is solely the woman's responsibility? Is that why you could cheat so easily? If you really cared about her, you wouldn't have done what you did. This isn't Meline's fault, Kenneth's father continued. It's all due to your thoughts and actions. I was learning this for the first time too. Kenneth's mother, Jane, had struggled for 10 years to have him. Tears streamed down her face as she silently listened. Carly, Tom said, leave this house now. Why? Kenneth asked, bewildered. You're a long-awaited son. I can't bear to look at you now, Tom said. Don't come back until you truly understand your mistakes. Where should I go? Kenneth asked. Back to our apartment. That apartment has already been canceled, I said. With the new house, there was no need to keep it. I canceled it right after reporting to the police. There's no place for you to return. Kenneth was shocked to realize he had nowhere to go. In frustration, he started blaming his mistress. It's your fault. All the money I spent, and now you say you never intended to marry me. It's fraud. She remained calm and replied, I was clear about it being a sugar relationship from the start. I never asked for money or gifts. If you want to sue me, go ahead, but I have proof of our arrangement. And don't forget the alimony, I said. Kenneth seemed flustered. Wait, please wait. I contacted his parents with her and then left their house. Later, I hired a lawyer and sent a demand letter for the alimony. I didn't send it to his parents' house, knowing he no longer lived there. Why is it being sent here? Kenneth's workplace receptionist asked as she looked at the letter. It's possible to send such documents to both residential and employment addresses, I explained. This is regarding the alimony. Is that what this is about? She asked, noticing Kenneth's pale face. You look so shaken. Didn't you inform him? I did, I confirmed. I just told the truth. No one asked me to keep quiet. It's his own doing. The arrival of the demand letter at Kenneth's workplace spread news about his actions, including his sugar dating and the subsequent loss of everything. Overcome with embarrassment, Kenneth couldn't handle the gossip and resigned, claiming he was leaving on his own terms. His troubles didn't end there. He sought free legal advice, claiming he was a victim of marriage fraud. The response was discouraging. We see cases like this, but with the evidence you provided, it's not considered fraud. You agreed that it was a sugar relationship from the start, the advisor said. If you developed feelings later, that was one-sided. We won't stop you from suing, but it's likely a waste of money. Kenneth decided not to pursue the lawsuit based on this advice. Eventually, he came to me, defeated. I don't know what I was thinking. I overlooked how important you were even after 8 years together. I promise this time, I'll make you happy and won't be distracted by anyone else, he pleaded. Naturally, his plea over the phone didn't sway me. My response was resolute. I refuse. Why? After all this begging, I realized over these 8 years that you are a terrible person. You try to blame everything on me and take what's mine, then shamelessly come back after losing it all. What benefit would there be for me to reunite with someone so selfish? Kenneth protested. You don't have to put it that way. You once said the same things to me. Anyway, never contact me again, I said firmly, though given your situation, I doubt you can. I hung up, deleted all his contact information, and changed my phone number. However, a few days later, something unexpected happened. Your ex-husband came to the house the other day, one of the neighbors said. We had to chase him away after he caused a commotion. What was he thinking? I asked, astonished. The neighborhood ladies who were aware of the situation pretended to call the police to drive him away. Since then, I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but I'm confident he isn't leading a happy life. It was our wedding anniversary, and my husband, daughter, and I were gathered around the table, savoring a delicious meal together. After we finished eating, my husband stood up with a small, excited smile. I picked up a special wine for tonight, he said, his voice warm with anticipation. Hope you'll enjoy it. Oh, that's so thoughtful of you, I responded, smiling back. Let me open it. Is the wine opener in the kitchen? He got up and headed toward the kitchen, his actions almost rehearsed. Moments later, he returned with a glass of wine, handing it to me with a flourish. Here you go. Give it a try. Thank you, I said, raising the glass. Cheers to us. As soon as I took a sip of the wine, I choked and gasped for air. I can't breathe, I cried out, collapsing to the floor and clutching my throat. Our 7-year-old daughter, witnessing the panic, burst into tears. Daddy, something's wrong with Mommy. We need to call an ambulance, she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. My husband, however, remained eerily silent and unmoved, merely watching me in distress. Our daughter clung to my clothes, sobbing uncontrollably. Once my movements had ceased, he coldly pushed her aside and, without a word, walked out of the house. As soon as the front door clicked shut, I quickly sat up, reflecting on the reality of my situation. My name is Mary. I'm 34 years old and I've been married. I'm a composer with a bit of a name, known for providing songs to singers and groups. One of my earlier tracks became a theme song for a TV series, and the royalties have afforded me a comfortable lifestyle. I met my husband, Kenny, at a friend's wedding after party. He was in sales for a liquor company and enjoyed drinking as much as I did. Our mutual love for alcohol brought us together. Kenny, with his knack for recklessness and lack of foresight, was once charming in his spontaneity. We began dating, started going out for drinks on weekends, and eventually got married a few years later. Soon after, we were blessed with a daughter named Holly, completing our family of 3. After we got married, I quickly noticed that Kenny wasn't very involved with household chores or childcare. Even with Holly's arrival, he continued his carefree lifestyle, seemingly oblivious to the demands of my busy life. One evening, as Holly cried loudly in her crib, Kenny called out from the kitchen, "Hey Mary, Holly's crying. I'm cooking. Can you take care of her?" I replied, "It's a hassle. She might be more comfortable with you." Kenny avoided taking responsibility with excuses, remaining fixated on his phone. With a resigned sigh, I turned off the stove and went to tend to Holly. "Kenny, I asked this many times, but can you please help more around the house and with Holly? Managing everything on my own is overwhelming." "Why should I? I'm already balancing work and household chores. Holly is our child, not just mine." Kenny's response was a re-smile. "Why not just hire a housekeeper or babysitter?" "That's not the issue," I said, frustrated. "I don't want to spend recklessly, especially with Holly's future in mind. We agreed to maintain a middle-class lifestyle, didn't we?" "Did we?" he retorted, clearly uninterested in the discussion. "Anyway, I'm always exhausted from work. You handle the house and everything." Despite numerous attempts to have a proper conversation, I never received a satisfactory response. Eventually, I had no choice but to manage both household chores and care for Holly on my own. As the years passed, Holly grew quickly, and before we knew it, she was 5 years old and about to start elementary school. To celebrate this milestone, my in-laws planned a dinner party. Their home is about an hour's drive away, and we've always enjoyed a good relationship with them. My father-in-law is a strict man who values honesty but has always been kind to me, while my mother-in-law is relaxed and charming. At the dinner table, Holly proudly displayed her new backpack and lunch bag. "Thank you, Grandpa and Grandma," she said, beaming. My in-laws watched with joy, clearly delighted by her excitement. "Mary, Holly's growth is a testament to your hard work," my father-in-law said as he poured me a drink, causing me to blush slightly. "Holly's such a good girl. She helps me out a lot," I replied, smiling. "Well, she's my daughter," Kenny said with pride, and I chose to let it pass without comment. "I heard you're working on the theme song for the next movie, Mary," my mother-in-law added. "Yes, the song is ready. The movie is scheduled for release next month," I confirmed. "Kenny, you have a wonderful wife. You must be very proud," my father-in-law remarked. However, Kenny's expression remained unchanged, and he didn't seem particularly pleased. "But she earns so much, yet I don't get to enjoy any of the luxuries that come with it," Kenny said, surprising both my in-laws and me. "What?" we all exclaimed, taken aback by his comment. Kenny continued, "People call her a prominent composer, so I expected a better lifestyle. She never gives me any pocket money and refuses to enhance our quality of life. She's stubborn and stingy." "Hold on, Kenny," my mother-in-law interjected. "You both live in a beautiful apartment. Didn't Mary buy that?" "Yes," my father-in-law agreed. "And isn't it a man's role to support the family rather than rely on Mary? Have you considered working to increase your own income?" Yeah, got it," Kenny grumbled. And that was the end of the conversation. I felt a mix of irritation towards him and gratitude for my in-laws' support. Soon after, Kenny started coming home late, claiming it was due to work. At first, I wasn't too concerned, given that his sales job often required overtime. But then, he began spending even his days off away from home and was always glued to his phone when he was there. His interactions with Holly and me grew increasingly distant. One Sunday, Holly had planned a special outing with Kenny. She gently shook him awake. "Dad, it's already 9 o'clock. Remember, today was supposed to be our outing day." At Holly's words, Kenny suddenly sat up and without saying a word roughly pushed her aside. Holly, taken aback and with tears welling up in her eyes, stumbled back. "What's going on?" I demanded, gathering Holly in my arms and raising my voice. Kenny, now fully awake, looked clearly irritated. "I have other things to do today," he snapped. "I needed to sleep a bit longer. Did you forget your promise to Holly? And how could you push our daughter like that?" I demanded, my frustration clear. "Be quiet, you're both in the way. Get out of the bedroom now," Kenny shouted, forcefully ushering Holly and me out before getting ready with meticulous care and leaving the house. His behavior was completely unforgivable, especially towards Holly. As I comforted Holly, my doubts about Kenny deepened. A month later, one evening after a particularly exhausting day at work, I collapsed into bed after tucking Holly in. In the middle of the night, feeling thirsty, I went to the kitchen for a drink. As I stood there, I heard Kenny's cheerful voice coming from the living room. It sounded like he was on a call with someone. I strained to hear what Kenny was saying, my curiosity piqued. Suddenly, a phrase that stopped me in my tracks reached my ears. "Beth, you're the only one I love." I was stunned. This was clearly a conversation with another woman. Infidelity. Just as I was about to confront him, I overheard another disturbing statement. "Also, start the plan for the wedding anniversary in 3 days. Everything will go as planned." Kenny continued discussing the details of this plan over the phone. I was chilled by the implications. What's going on? Kenny is not only cheating but also scheming something with her. I quickly slipped my recording phone back into my pocket and retreated to the bedroom without being noticed. When Kenny returned later, he fell into a deep sleep beside me, but I couldn't close my eyes at all. The next morning, after Kenny left for work, I took some time to collect my thoughts in our room. Initially overwhelmed by sadness, my feelings quickly shifted to anger. I know this myself, I resolved. I went to an electronics store and purchased security cameras, installing them throughout the house. 3 days later, on our wedding anniversary, Kenny had been unusually affectionate since he woke up. "Mary, today is a special day," he said warmly. "Yes, it is," I replied. "I'm glad you remembered," he said, smiling. "Of course I remembered," Kenny said with a smile. "I know I've been coming home late from work lately, and I'm sorry about that, but today, I'll be home early. Let's celebrate our wedding anniversary." "I'm looking forward to it," I replied. "I've prepared a special meal." "Mary, I truly love you," he added. Feigning ignorance, I simply nodded as Kenny headed off to work. Once he was gone, I calmly continued my preparations. At around 6:00 p.m., Kenny returned home. I had arranged a lavish dinner and was ready to greet him. "How was your day, Kenny?" I asked. "Dad, you came home early today?" Holly exclaimed. Holly was thrilled to see Kenny home earlier than usual, her excitement evident. Watching her joy while knowing what was to come weighed heavily on my heart. I felt a pang of sorrow as I looked at her. "I'm sorry, Holly," I whispered. Kenny looked around the table, taking in the feast I had prepared. "Wow, this looks amazing. Shall we dig in?" The three of us gathered around the table and enjoyed the meal together. As we finished, Kenny reached for something he had set aside. "I bought a special wine for our anniversary. I think you'll really like it." "Thank you. That's very thoughtful of you. I'll go ahead and open it. Is the wine opener in the kitchen?" He spoke in a rehearsed tone as if reading from a script and headed to the kitchen. Moments later, he returned, pouring the wine into my glass. "Here, give it a try." "Thank you." "Cheers," I said, trying to remain composed. As soon as I took a sip, a wave of distress hit me. "I can't breathe," I gasped, clutching my throat and collapsing. Our 5-year-old daughter, horrified, cried out, "Daddy, something's wrong with Mommy. Call an ambulance." Kenny remained silent, watching me in agony while our daughter, her face streaked with tears, desperately tugged at his clothes. When I finally stopped moving, Kenny pushed our daughter aside and left without a word. As soon as I heard the front door slam, I quickly got up. I had anticipated this outcome. Holly, seeing my calmness, looked stunned, her face streaked with tears and snot. I held her gently. "I'm so sorry, Holly. It was a terrible prank. A really cruel one. I never meant to frighten you." "A prank? I thought I lost you," she sobbed, clinging to me. In the shadows, a group of onlookers watched with bewildered expressions. Kenny came home late that night. "Is Holly asleep already?" Kenny asked as he walked in, his voice tinged with annoyance. I remained hidden in the darkened living room. "Welcome back, Kenny," I said, flipping on the light. His face went pale, clearly shocked by my sudden appearance. "Why are you still here?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. Surprised by my calm demeanor, I replied, watching his shock deepen. It was all an act. I overheard your plan. The conversation I accidentally heard from Kenny was chilling. You'll handle the poison, right? It needs to be colorless, odorless, and tasteless. She loves wine, so it'll be easy to mix in. Afterward, we'll stage it as a suicide due to work stress. Once she's out of the picture, we'll inherit everything. The insurance, the royalties, and even this apartment. It'll be the start of our new life. When Kenny realized I knew about his plan, his face flushed with anger. You eavesdropped. That's despicable, he shouted. Even if it was an accident, discussing such things at home was foolish. That's how I gained the upper hand, I replied calmly. Kenny's rage only intensified as he glared at me. He then grabbed my bag and pulled out a small, unfamiliar bottle. It was clearly not one of my things. I guess it was intended to frame me for a supposed suicide. Now that you know, I have no choice but to make you drink this. There's still time to stop, I pleaded, trying to find a way to escape. Just then, a loud voice echoed through the room. Kenny, stop. Dad. Both my in-laws appeared in the doorway, their expressions stern. Why are you two here? Kenny demanded, bewildered. We've been here since this evening at Mary's request, my father-in-law explained, pointing to a surveillance camera mounted in the corner. We were monitoring the feed from another room. We saw everything from when you poured the contents of that bottle into a glass to when you hid it in Mary's bag. Kenny's face went pale as he realized the camera had captured his every move and that my in-laws had been watching the footage in real time. Staring at the camera, he looked utterly stunned. That's not all. I recorded the entire conversation, I said, pulling out my phone and playing the audio. The incriminating evidence made my in-laws wince and Kenny's face drained of color. With this recording, the camera footage, and the remaining wine as evidence, it will be easy to report you to the police. Kenny immediately dropped to his knees in front of his parents. Dad, Mom, please help me. I don't want to be labeled a criminal. You don't want your son to be arrested, do you? You idiot, my father-in-law said coldly, delivering a sharp blow to Kenny's face that sent him sprawling. My mother-in-law looked on with clear disdain. It's not just what you did to Mary. You didn't even consider Holly, my father-in-law said, his voice full of condemnation. You made her cry, and I can't forgive you for that. I can't even think of you as our son. We've already reported you to the police. They should be here soon. Accept your fate, my father-in-law added. Seeing that he was abandoned, a tearful Kenny stumbled toward me. Don't come any closer, I said firmly. Mary, please forgive me, Kenny pleaded. If you don't press charges, I won't be arrested. I only love you. Let's start over as a family with Holly. Do you really expect me to believe that after everything you've done, after trying to take my life? There's no way I can ever forgive you. I'm so sorry. Please help me. You and your mistress both, Kenny begged. I will never forgive you. Accept your punishment. Before he could say more, the sound of approaching police sirens grew louder. After the incident, Kenny and his mistress were convicted in court and sentenced to prison. Kenny and I finalized our divorce through our lawyers. His parents provided me with a substantial sum as compensation for the distress their son had caused. It turned out that Kenny's mistress, a university student studying pharmacology, had used her access to steal a poison from the university, intending to use her knowledge to harm me. I also sought compensation from her, which her parents promptly paid. I have no intention of ever forgiving her. While Kenny is serving his prison sentence, neither I nor his parents have visited him. They've made it clear they'll support him once he's released on parole, arranging for him to settle and work far from here. I sincerely hope Kenny never crosses paths with me or our daughter, Holly, again. Holly and I have moved to a quiet, peaceful place. I told her, your dad is working far away now. When she replied, he doesn't have to come back, I couldn't help but smile, though it was tinged with bitterness. From now on, I'm focused on leading a calm and positive life, cherishing the future we're building together. I've decided to buy a luxury car. Honestly, it's more than I need, but my parents are also considering a new vehicle, and this one might be perfect for them. Since marrying Anthony, I've noticed some changes in his behavior. He's become more self-absorbed and, surprisingly, even a bit envious of the nice car my parents gifted me. I'm starting to feel fed up. My name is Emma, and I'm 29 years old. I met Anthony back in college, and we've been married for 2 years. Anthony's a socialite, charismatic, and well-liked, while I'm more reserved with a close-knit group of friends. Our relationship started off unexpectedly. It grew through shared classes and study groups. His interest took me by surprise, and when he asked me out, I was thrilled and accepted right away. That was the beginning of our journey together. Anthony's charm, relaxed nature, and dedication to his studies drew me to him. He was surrounded by friends and knew several stylish, attractive women, so I figured he'd have no trouble finding the girlfriend if he wanted. Once I asked him nervously if he really thought I was the one for him. His reaction threw me off. He looked surprised and asked why I would ask that. Feeling insecure, I just wanted reassurance, but after a thoughtful pause, he simply said he felt comfortable with me. It wasn't the heartfelt response I had hoped for, and before I could process it, he became engrossed in his phone. Not wanting to push the issue, I changed the subject and apologized, though the doubt lingered. On the surface, our relationship seemed fine. We graduated, got married, and settled into a condo. I landed a stable job while Anthony continued with graduate school and worked part-time. When I shared news of our engagement with my mom, she was ecstatic, admitting she'd started to wonder when I'd introduce a boyfriend. I felt a little guilty for not telling them about Anthony sooner, but my mom, knowing my independent nature, was just glad I had someone who cared about me. My parents have always been my role models. Like us, they met in college and have maintained a deep love and respect over the years. My dad climbed the corporate ladder while my mom followed her passion for cooking, eventually teaching culinary classes. They've always honored each other's independence and supported each other's dreams, and I want a marriage as nurturing and supportive as theirs. Growing up in a financially comfortable family, I learned the importance of independence early on. This influenced my choice not to follow Anthony into graduate school. I wanted to carve my own path. My dream has always been simple yet meaningful, to create a family environment as warm as the one I was raised in, complete with a loving marriage and perhaps children someday. But as we settled into married life, things started to change. Anthony's financial contributions were minimal while he focused on his studies and part-time job. One day, I brought up the idea of him contributing a bit more towards our expenses. His response was dismissive. "I do contribute, Emma. Didn't we agree you'd cover the living expenses when we moved in?" His words left me uneasy. Anthony's dream of becoming a professor was clear, and I admired his dedication. But as he pursued his career, I felt increasingly burdened by our finances. Despite my assurances that I could manage with my stable income, his curt retort made me wonder if we were truly working as a team. When I first brought it up, I stammered, giving a feeble agreement, unsure how to push back. He sighed heavily. "You wouldn't understand, Emma. Being a graduate student is expensive." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Oh, and I need $26,000 for a research trip. Can you lend it to me? I'll pay you back." His requests for money became more frequent, and the tension in our relationship steadily grew. Anthony often stayed out late, leaving me alone with meals that went cold and unanswered phone calls. Yet whenever he returned, his mood was upbeat. He'd casually compliment my cooking or suggest spontaneous plans, making me feel valued for a moment. These fleeting gestures of kindness gave me brief glimpses of the joyful marriage I longed for, pushing me to avoid the deeper issues between us. But despite my efforts, feelings of loneliness and anxiety became my constant companions, caught in a cycle of temporary happiness followed by long periods of isolation. I struggled to confide in anyone about my feelings, especially my parents who seemed so happy for us. But they likely sensed that something was off. After a long time away, I visited them, and my father suggested I stay for dinner. My mom went all out, cooking a meal filled with warmth and welcome. During dinner, my father mentioned that Aunt Margaret had recently visited. "She was asking about you," he said, describing her as spirited, ambitious, and fiercely independent, the very traits that define her. "I'll reach out to her soon." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, feeling their gentle encouragement to reconnect with family. My father shared fond memories of Margaret, recalling how she often joked that Anthony had whisked me away. Margaret, who had never planned to marry herself, had always been more of a mentor than just an aunt. I could talk to her about things too complex to bring up with my parents, and she'd always understood me deeply, providing advice and support whenever I was navigating new chapters in my life. Though I'd been hesitant to open up to Margaret about my relationship with Anthony, my visit to my parents sparked a desire to reach out to her. A few days later, we met at a cozy cafe. Margaret, ever so stylish, greeted me with a warm look and offered a bit of fashion advice. "Marriage is more than just the ceremony, Emma," she said, smiling as she sipped her tea. "It's important to feel confident and keep up with yourself. Your appearance says a lot about how you feel. Take care of it." In that moment, I realized I'd been neglecting my interests and quickly apologized for losing touch. Margaret chuckled, saying, "That's just like you, Emma. It's good to be earnest, but your timidity likely comes from not stepping out enough." Hearing about Anthony had made her happy. She thought I was finally ready to move forward. We hadn't spent a day just relaxing together in such a long time, and the beautiful weather made our outing even more delightful. As we settled on the cafe's sunny terrace, I felt at ease enough to open up about my concerns with Anthony. At first, I thought that even someone as reserved as I am could make things work with him, but recently, I was beginning to have doubts. Margaret listened quietly, her gentle nods showing empathy. When I finished, she softly asked, "Have you shared any of this with your parents, Emma?" "No," I admitted. "I was hesitant to tell even you today. I didn't want to seem vulnerable. I felt like I needed to handle this on my own to prove my independence. If my parents knew, they'd probably insist I move back home." Margaret respected my choice to manage things alone but offered reassurance. "If you ever need help, I'm here for you, Emma. I'll support you no matter what." About a month later, my mom called, casually saying, "Whenever you're free, could you drop by? Nothing urgent." Since I had the next day off, I decided to visit. As I approached their house, I noticed a new car in the driveway. I gasped, excitement bubbling up. "Is this car new, Dad? Did you just buy it? Can I take it for a spin?" With a warm smile, my dad reassured me, "This car is yours, Emma. Use it however you like. We thought it would be useful." My mom added softly, "We remembered how much you liked this model when you saw it in an ad. We thought it might cheer you up, especially since you've been going through a rough patch." Their thoughtful gesture, a shiny new SUV from a renowned international brand, filled me with an overwhelming sense of support and reminded me that, no matter how hard things got, I always had a place to come home to. Dad even arranged a parking spot near my condo. I was deeply moved by their generosity. I laughed in disbelief, struggling to comprehend their kindness. Later, as I drove downtown, I pulled out the car keys and pressed the button, watching the SUV's lights flash brightly. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What's with the new car?" Anthony asked. I turned, stunned to see my husband, who had been absent for ages. His sudden appearance left me speechless. He looked at the car, a smug grin spreading across his face. "A gift from your parents?" Every time I faced Anthony, words seemed to catch in my throat, but I was exhausted from feeling small. "Anthony, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed, my voice trembling but brimming with newfound courage. His response was sharp and dismissive. "Are you just realizing this now? Did you really think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His mocking laughter stung, and something within me snapped. "Then why did you marry me?" I shot back, louder than intended. Anthony's expression darkened, his voice cold and blunt. "Oh, so you're going to be that blunt? Marrying you was just convenient. And now, what? You want the car too? It's wasted on you." I was stunned by the harshness of his words. Seemingly unfazed, he added with chilling indifference, "We're getting a divorce. And without me, you'll never find another man. Think about that." With that, he turned and left without a second glance, leaving me feeling shattered yet oddly resolute. Sitting in the driver's seat, I fought to calm myself, my mind racing. After a few days of reflection and a heartfelt conversation with Aunt Margaret, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents, who welcomed me with open arms. Life felt peaceful again, if only for a while. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Anthony appeared at my parents' house, his parents in tow. They all settled stiffly into the living room, and Anthony's father spoke first, his tone stern. "We're here to discuss our son's divorce." As the conversation began to unfold, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. This time, I wouldn't be silenced. "If you don't agree to the divorce," I started, my voice steady, "then let me make myself clear." I warned Anthony that I would leverage Brian's connections at the university to jeopardize his future. It wouldn't take much to tarnish the career of a junior registrar if their daughter filed a complaint. Anthony, who suddenly seemed more concerned, was taken aback by my assertiveness. He viewed my tactics as aggressive and intimidating. His father vehemently argued, "We could easily contest the divorce, Emma. Beneath her simple appearance, she's manipulative and greedy. Poor Anthony. I've heard she even paid him to stay away. She must have entertained other men. We should take this to family court and claim that Anthony was coerced into this divorce." But if Emma were to make a genuine apology, perhaps things could be different. Just then, Aunt Margaret suggested that relinquishing the SUV might help smooth things over. Anthony and his parents listened quietly, absorbing his father's protests. At that moment, the doorbell rang. My mom answered it, and Aunt Margaret walked in, her presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. "Sorry I'm late," she said, joining the tense gathering. Anthony's family, who had only met her once at my wedding, looked surprised. "What are you doing here?" Anthony's mother exclaimed, visibly annoyed. "It's rude to barge in like this. We're in the middle of something." Unfazed, Margaret replied, "You've heard about Anthony's divorce, haven't you?" "How would an outsider like you know about this?" Anthony's mother challenged. Margaret continued calmly, "I was informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my niece." Anthony's mother shot back, "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Are you still going to make accusations after seeing this?" Without missing a beat, Margaret pulled a stack of documents from her bag and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. "I hired a private detective to look into this," she revealed. "It turns out Anthony has been cheating on Emma with multiple women. He hardly came home because of it, taking advantage of Emma's kindness and even asking her for money." The revelation left everyone in stunned silence, and the tone of the meeting shifted dramatically as they processed the weight of Margaret's findings. I was deeply immersed in my university research, so when I finally made it home, we spent quality time together, sharing meals and exploring the world outside. To outsiders, we appeared like any other married couple. "Say something, Emma," Anthony pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "You don't need to defend yourself," his father quickly reassured him, eager to regain control of the situation. Margaret's unexpected intervention had illuminated the harsh reality of my troubled marriage, revealing Anthony's deceit and the manipulation I had endured. This new information forced everyone, especially Anthony's parents, to reconsider their approach to the divorce negotiations. "It's not your fault," Anthony's mother hastily added, clutching the documents suspiciously. "These must be fabricated. Our Anthony would never do such things. He's a kind, outstanding son." "Kind to his parents, maybe," Aunt Margaret interjected sharply, her calm demeanor belying her evident resolve. She pulled out a photograph from the stack of documents. "I was at a hotel for a business meeting recently and saw Anthony there with another woman, looking quite cozy. I had the detective investigate Anthony as well, and the results confirmed my suspicions." Anthony's mother's face drained of color as she grabbed the documents to examine them closely. "What is this, Anthony? How long has this been going on? These are all lies, aren't they?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Anthony tried to snatch the documents back, denying everything, but it was too late. The seeds of doubt had been sown. "You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her, wasn't it?" his mother accused, her voice cracking under the strain. No matter how much Anthony tried to soothe her, his mother was inconsolable. She stormed out of the house, tears streaming down her face, with Anthony stumbling after her, trying to explain. Amidst the chaos, he blurted out, "Hey, wait, what about me?" As he followed her, bewildered, the rest of us were left in stunned silence. Aunt Margaret, however, wore a satisfied smile and gave me a knowing wink. It was clear she had anticipated this dramatic turn of events and the revelations that would follow. After the tumultuous scene, Aunt Margaret confided in me that Anthony's parents had eventually separated. "You won't fall for such a terrible man again," she assured me, her tone protective yet empowering. "Let's focus on making you even more resilient. I'll teach you everything I know about grooming and self-care." Despite her busy schedule, Aunt Margaret made time for me, taking me out for meals and shopping trips. During this period, I absorbed a great deal from her, gaining a new perspective on self-care and confidence. Her guidance not only helped heal my wounds but also equipped me with the tools to build a stronger, more confident self. A year after my divorce, I made a life-altering decision to enroll in graduate school. This period marked a time of intense personal growth and transformation. One day, while waiting at a street intersection, I heard my name being called. I turned around to see Anthony, my ex-husband. He seemed genuinely surprised by my appearance and remarked on how much I had changed. At first glance, I barely recognized him. The man who once knew me as his unremarkable ex-wife now saw a woman who had blossomed into confidence and beauty. Meanwhile, Anthony's life had taken a sharp decline following his parents' very public and scandalous divorce. He had dropped out of graduate school after Kyle and Karen withdrew their financial support amidst the turmoil he had caused. Struggling to cover his tuition and living expenses, the carefree lifestyle he once enjoyed had become a distant memory. The women who had once shown interest in him had moved on, and his former social status had seemingly evaporated overnight. As Anthony was about to suggest we catch up, Jonathan, the man I was currently dating, approached us, his timing perfect and signaling a clear demarcation between my past and the new chapter I was embarking on, one that no longer included Anthony. Nearby, a group of women couldn't help but admire Jonathan, wondering aloud if he was a model. Observing my brief exchange with Anthony, Jonathan gave him a polite nod and said, "It's okay, we're done here. Let's go," taking my hand confidently. Anthony remained rooted to the spot, visibly shocked as Jonathan and continued on our way. My gaze stayed fixed ahead, concentrating on the road and the bright prospects that lay before us. I didn't glance back even once as we departed.
My father has been expanding and generating profits within the company founded by my grandfather. Recently, he promised to transfer a luxurious villa, a mansion, to me. However, I've come to the realization that what's rightfully yours should also be mine as your husband. This mansion is now mine, and I plan to hire you as a housemaid. If you're not on board with that, well, you can always consider divorce. As it turns out, despite the mansion supposedly being in my name, my husband had clandestinely inscribed his own name on the legal papers. Does he genuinely believe that's acceptable? Does he comprehend the potential consequences of such actions? My name is Aaron, and while I don't intend to boast, I was born into a wealthy family. My father, the CEO of several companies, inherited the business from my grandfather, who initially started a small shop repairing and selling TVs and music systems. Over time, the company flourished, expanding into various branches and diversifying into the IT sector. My father's foresight, selling computers and accessories before they gained widespread popularity, proved to be a lucrative move. Besides IT, he ventured into real estate, collaborating with local businesses and actively contributing to community development. My mother served as the vice president of the company, and after studying it in college, I joined the family business. Despite the outward appearance of affluence, we didn't live as extravagantly as portrayed in TV dramas. My father believed in instilling good values, rejecting the notion that spoiling a child aids in their responsible growth. Our family home was spacious, and we had a maid, but as a child, I actively participated in household chores. Dining at fancy restaurants occurred infrequently, and our international travels were limited to once a year, with the majority being local trips. My school life seemed quite ordinary, and it would have been challenging for anyone to guess that my family was affluent. Due to my unassuming demeanor, I dated guys within my age group, just like any other girl. Among them, Michael, who later became my husband, was one of my colleagues at the same workplace. During those times, I worked as a sales representative and office manager at an IT-related shop, and Michael was also a sales rep there. I chose not to disclose that my father was the CEO to my coworkers, making it easier for Michael to approach me. I noticed that he was straightforward and had no reservations. Although I didn't seek extravagance, I'd always suggested places within Michael's budget. During our dates at restaurants, he would order generously, explaining that if there's extra, he'd eat it, opting for a cost-effective approach to enjoy a hearty meal. Some might have considered him a bit frugal, but I found it endearing. Unbeknownst to him, I earned several times more than he did, Content with my fair compensation for the responsibilities I held, I unconsciously became accommodating. Michael, always keen on budget-friendly ways to satisfy his appetite, received my gestures with gratitude. During our dates, I'd often bought extra food or thoughtful gifts, knowing he would appreciate them. When shopping for clothes, I would add extra socks for him, and on occasions when I got a new bedspread, I'd include pajamas and a pillow for him. I genuinely enjoyed making him happy. Even when visiting his home, I willingly cooked for him and took care of the cleanup. Out of the blue, Michael proposed to me one day, expressing that there was no one better than me. At that moment, I hesitated, harboring reservations. After all, my father was the CEO of a major company, and he held a prominent position at my current workplace. I feared that if Michael were to discover this, he might reconsider our relationship. Deciding to take Michael to my parents' home for the first time, I aimed to introduce him to my family and disclose everything about our background. If he accepted it all, I would be more than willing to marry him. As Michael's inaugural visit to my family home approached, he appeared visibly nervous. However, my dad, though strict on occasion, generally exuded a calm demeanor. When I presented Michael as the man I was contemplating marrying, my father welcomed him with a warm smile, alleviating some of Michael's tension. Although surprised to learn about my father's CEO status, Michael managed to navigate the visit smoothly with my father's supportive demeanor. Upon leaving the house, Michael exclaimed about the enormity and magnificence of the residence, expressing gratitude for my father's kindness. He even suggested that we could get along well. When I casually mentioned my dad's ownership of additional buildings and a vacation home, Michael appeared more astonished. Despite the revelation, he resolved to marry me, the daughter of such a prominent man, and I agreed wholeheartedly. Eventually, we became a married couple. However, something bothered me. At the moment of accepting his proposal, I noticed a slightly mischievous grin on Michael's face for a split second. Dismissing it as his quirky way of smiling, I didn't dwell on it, but perhaps had I paid more attention, I could have averted the impending tragedy. As Michael and I moved into a typical, not overly luxurious apartment, he seemed to grasp the significance of my father's status. Yet I never explicitly disclosed my income, maintaining a modest lifestyle. Gradually, Michael's demeanor changed after settling in. While I balanced work and household responsibilities, he started demanding more. One evening, as I prepared dinner, he asked, "What's for dinner tonight?" In response, I informed him that I had prepared his favorite curry rice. However, to my surprise, he appeared dissatisfied as he sat on the sofa. Letting out a sigh, he expressed his desire for something like a prime beef steak once in a while. This caught me off guard, as he had never complained about my cooking before. I pointed out that prime beef was quite expensive, but he clicked his tongue in annoyance, insisting that, considering my father's earnings, indulging in prime beef occasionally should not be a big deal. Reluctantly, I agreed to get prime beef for the next day. Michael smirked, stating that we should be able to enjoy such things normally from now on. While my salary could afford such luxuries, my previous lifestyle had instilled a reluctance to spend so extravagantly. However, to avoid issues early in our marriage, I resigned myself to the decision to actually cook prime beef steak. Unfortunately, Michael's lavish tendencies did not stop there. He frequently requested expensive ingredients for meals and specified upscale restaurants when we went out. His cravings extended beyond food, manifesting in desires for a TV larger than 60 inches and even suggesting we should purchase a massage chair for the sake of relaxation after work. These remarks became more frequent, and I began to feel that it was getting out of hand. I questioned the need for such extravagant items, expressing my concern about the expenses involved. Frustrated, I finally retorted, asking him if he thought we were made of money. I challenged his extravagant lifestyle, stating that living so lavishly was unnecessary. In response, Michael made a displeased face and clicked his tongue again, expressing his discontent. He argued that, as the husband, he contributed to the household expenses and insisted that I should listen to him. However, his statements puzzled me, as his contributions, while appreciated, did not amount to a lavish sum. In fact, I contributed more, a fact I never disclosed to him. Despite my substantial financial input, he made these assertions without hesitation. This change in Michael's behavior left me questioning his mindset. He was not like this before, and I couldn't comprehend why he had changed at that moment. I found myself in a state of confusion, unable to comprehend Michael's recent behavior. In response to his audacious requests, I decided to temporarily appease the situation by telling him, "All right, I'll think about it." Little did I know that the explanation for his bold behavior would become apparent just a few days later. On that particular day, my father summoned me to the office of our shop where I worked, claiming that he had something important to discuss. While Michael was engrossed in his work, my father entered the office and initiated a serious conversation. He expressed uncertainty about how much longer he could continue as the CEO and hinted at the possibility of me taking over in the future. Furthermore, he mentioned transferring the vacation home to me. This vacation home, briefly mentioned to Michael earlier, resembled a large lodge located about a 30-minute drive away. It was a place where my father used to host gatherings with town shop owners, under the guise of meetings. Although such meetings were no longer held, the house was consistently ready to be lived in, maintained by a housekeeper. My father offered me the freedom to use the vacation home however I wanted. This proposition left me torn, as I had no concrete idea of how to utilize such a property. The vacation home boasted over 6,000 square feet, with a lavish garden surrounded by nature, akin to a mansion. Lacking the social connections to host significant parties, I contemplated keeping it as an asset. I conveyed to my father that I would positively consider his proposal but needed more time to make a decision. He assured me there was no rush and left a contract on the desk before departing the shop. Returning home after work, I leaned towards accepting the mansion, intending to give it further thought the next day. However, the following day brought an unexpected turn of events. Upon arriving at work, I discovered that Michael, who typically arrived before me, was absent from the shop. Intrigued, I entered the office only to find him there. Instinctively, I asked, "What are you doing here?" To my surprise, he flashed a document in my face, stating, "I overheard the conversation about the mansion yesterday. Sounds like an amazing deal, right?" Dumbfounded by Michael's audacious move, I reluctantly signed the document he flaunted, a contract my father had handed me just the day before. Shockingly, Michael had inscribed his own name on it. I was utterly taken aback and couldn't help but express my disbelief. "What on earth are you doing?" I questioned him, but Michael, without a hint of remorse, casually responded, "Why not? Your dad said he's giving away an amazing mansion, right? If you won't decide, I figured I'd take it." He said this with a smirk, but there was no way I could accept it. Persistently, I pleaded with him, emphasizing the house's worth of $4 million and my father's intention to give it to me. However, Michael dismissed my concerns with a nonchalant laugh. $4 million bucks? Dan, that's impressive. Think about it. I have the right to this mansion because you're my wife, and I'm your husband, so I have a right to what's yours. Moreover, your dad really likes me. He probably won't have any complaints. So from today, this villa is my house. If you live in a wealthy house, you've got to make use of it. How about I hire you as a maid in this mansion? If you have any complaints, I'll divorce you anytime, he confidently declared. It was at that moment when I recalled Michael's past actions and words, and everything finally clicked. He seemingly had no qualms about taking from others, even if it meant practically stealing, without feeling guilty. During our dating days, I'd always showered him with gifts, but he never reciprocated. My giving nature might have corrupted him, leading him to believe that what was mine was automatically his. My dad's kindness to Michael likely made him feel my father was easy to manipulate, and perhaps he perceived me as even more gullible. With a plan forming in my mind, I decided to confront him. I declared, "Fine then. This mansion is yours, but I'm not going to be your maid. Let's get a divorce. Take care." After that, I returned to my job and, during my lunch break, called a divorce lawyer to initiate the process. Michael, seemingly unfazed, responded with bravado, claiming he was fine with it and canceling the lease on his current place. Little did he know that tragedy was about to hit him, and he just hadn't realized it yet. Later, I went back to my parents' place and shared everything with my father. From that point on, everything unfolded according to my plan. A few weeks later, Michael called me in a state of panic, having received an enormous bill. While his shock was understandable, it was only fair, considering the fixed property tax on the $4 million house he had claimed as his own. I casually informed Michael that he should expect to pay around that much for the property tax. However, he appeared utterly clueless, lacking knowledge that paying tax on owned property is common. Normally, my father would have covered the tax if he had received the property. But upon hearing the entire story, my usually calm father was furious. Despite my warnings about my father's strict nature, he declared he can have it if he can afford it, and accepted the property transfer to Michael. To be honest, a part of me wanted Michael to learn a tough lesson, and there was no way he could afford the hefty amount. Frustrated with Michael's persistent pleas, I decided to deliver a final blow. The annual property tax, I revealed, amounted to about $60,000. It dawned on me that Michael always had a mindset of trying to take advantage of his friends, possibly driving them away and leaving him without anyone to teach him common sense. Acknowledging that I may have been a bit unreasonable, I admitted that my once cute perception of Michael had drastically changed. Without any sympathy left, I hung up the phone. Subsequently, Michael couldn't sustain living in the house and faced forced eviction. Realizing he couldn't afford it, my father reverted the property deed back to my name, incurring the gift tax himself. Meanwhile, Michael faced severe consequences. He was fired from his job and charged with unlawfully changing the property deed. He received scoldings from his parents and was shunned by acquaintances. Now jobless and friendless, he barely scraped by in a rundown apartment, working odd jobs. His parents were even considering disowning him. As for me, I've been gradually preparing to take over my father's company. My father once told me that success in business doesn't come from looking for shortcuts. Reflecting on the fact that I almost married Michael, I deeply understand the truth in his words. Inspired by my father's greatness, I push forward every day in my involvement in running the business.
I officially transferred the house to my parents, knowing a divorce was becoming inevitable. With a cold, detached expression, Henry pointed at me and demanded that I leave, his voice laced with venomous insults. His parents watched, their approving smiles making it clear they stood behind his cruel words. Despite the hostility, I stayed composed, fully prepared for this moment. I had packed my bags long before, ready for this day. Without hesitation, I walked out, leaving them oblivious to the consequences that would soon unfold. I'm Amy, and I recently celebrated my 45th birthday. It's been quite a while since Henry and I were married, and our children have grown up, forging their own paths away from home. Once an ordinary salaried worker, my life took a turn when a friend introduced me to teaching others how to create handmade accessories. This shift from hobby to profession has been transformative, bringing me immense joy through my interactions with students and the daily act of creating. While some might doubt the wisdom of turning a passion into a career, I find deep fulfillment in it. Henry and I met by chance at my previous workplace, where he was associated with a client company. Our frequent encounters at work-related events blossomed into a deeper relationship, leading us to marry for love. After 4 wonderful years, we welcomed a lively and healthy son who has since graduated from a prestigious university and is now thriving in a happy marriage of his own. Yet, despite our son's achievements, Henry and I have struggled over the years. The gentle, thoughtful man I married transformed into someone much harsher, becoming increasingly demanding and treating me more like a servant than a partner. His expectations shifted daily, turning our home into a battleground over the smallest issues. As his verbal outbursts intensified, I found myself yearning for a fresh start, desperate to escape the turmoil. However, an unpaid mortgage kept me tethered to our current situation. To make matters worse, Henry inexplicably quit his job and now spends his days idly at home, leaving me to handle all the household responsibilities alone. The house we live in is especially dear to me as I finance its recent reconstruction with my savings. It stands as a testament to my dreams and hard work, a space crafted for my vision and effort. The spacious kitchen, thoughtfully designed, showcases my taste. Although Henry had some input in the layout, I ultimately covered all the expenses and ensured my preferences were realized. Building this house was both a challenge and a joy, embodying everything I had hoped for. Unfortunately, the financial burden was heavier than expected, forcing us to take on a larger loan than we had planned. Taking on such a significant financial burden in our 40s felt overwhelming, but the promise of happiness in our new home gave us the strength to manage the debt. Yet Henry remained dissatisfied. His input was only minimally reflected in the final design, and he frequently complained, dismissing the expenses as wasteful and akin to throwing money away. Despite his grievances, I chose to focus on the joy our new home brought, trying to ignore his discontent. As time passed, Henry's complaints grew quieter, and he began to express his frustration through childish behaviors, like scattering trash and creating messes to irritate me. I'd often found myself wondering when this cycle of conflict would come to an end. A few months after we moved in, as these thoughts swirled in my mind, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. We weren't expecting any visitors, which sparked my curiosity. Just as I was about to answer the door, Henry jumped up and moved to open it himself, as if he knew who it might be. Soon, cheerful voices and laughter floated in from the entrance. When the living room door finally swung open, I was taken aback to see my in-laws, Willie and Catherine. My relationship with them had always been strained. From the moment we announced our marriage, they had been cold and critical of my background, maintaining an uncomfortable distance even on our wedding day. Their sporadic visits since then always left me uncertain about how to navigate each encounter. Despite the lack of recent communication, their unexpected arrival left me feeling unsettled. I greeted them politely, though a hint of tension lingered in the air. They walked past me without a word, pointedly ignoring me and even brushing against my shoulder as they explored the house. Their envy was palpable as they admired the spacious, well-designed kitchen. Meanwhile, Henry reveled in their attention, proudly showing them around. When they returned, their faces reflected satisfaction, but Henry's mood shifted sharply. He turned to me with a stern expression and loudly commanded me to prepare tea and snacks quickly. Taken aback by his sudden outburst, I hurried to fulfill his request, feeling the weight of the moment as I set about making tea and snacks. Despite my efforts to be welcoming, Henry's parents appeared unsatisfied. Willie quickly polished off his snacks and tea, offering only a brief compliment about the house's interior. Amidst this, Henry, beaming with pride, extended an invitation for his parents to move in with us, hardly acknowledging my presence at all. As they listened to Henry and prepared to leave, I stood back, watching their retreating figures. The gap between Henry and me felt immense, especially as I saw him so animated and joyful with his parents, a side of him I hadn't witnessed in a long time. After Henry's invitation, his parents began visiting more frequently. What started as a few times a month quickly escalated to several times a week, and soon they were almost here every day. With each visit, their criticisms of me intensified, and Henry did nothing to intervene. Instead, he grew increasingly blameful, voicing relentless complaints about how I was supposedly upsetting our son. Amid the mounting challenges, I found myself unable to voice my growing frustration, settling instead for constant apologies. The visits from my in-laws became more frequent, often occurring while I was away. Henry and his parents left clear evidence of their activities behind: beer cans, empty bottles, and alcohol spills that stained our new rug. Despite my objections, our home began to smell of booze and felt increasingly neglected. Henry's complaints about my contributions felt particularly ironic, given that he did nothing to help around the house. His involvement in gambling added another layer of stress. Betting slips frequently appeared, highlighting the financial risks and the futility of trying to explain the dangers of his habit. The losses were especially painful as the money wasted was hard-earned for my relentless efforts. As the in-laws' visits became more frequent, they often timed their arrivals for when I was out. This made it increasingly difficult for me to manage the situation or assert any control over the growing chaos and discomfort in our home. One day, when I unexpectedly returned home early, I found Henry and his parents comfortably settled in our living room. Surprised, I confronted them, but their dismissive responses and snarky attitudes made it clear they saw my presence as an annoyance. Frustrated and stressed by their insolence, I realized I had reached my breaking point. Instead of succumbing to my emotions, I resolved to devise a plan to manage the situation effectively. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected incident unfolded. On a day I would typically be away, the in-laws arrived unannounced, their surprise at finding me home unmistakable. I couldn't resist making a sarcastic remark about their usual avoidance of me, but they brushed it off as they confidently entered the house. Henry greeted them with a warm smile and proceeded to show them around from the kitchen to the bathroom. As I watched their thorough inspection, suspicion crept in. It felt like there was a hidden agenda behind their visit. When they left, their satisfied expression suggested they had uncovered something significant. Curious and increasingly cautious, I questioned their need for such thorough inspections and wondered if there was something they felt compelled to tell me. I had previously warned Henry not to pry into my concerns, insisting it was none of his business, yet his behavior suggested he was hiding something. I suspected he was trying to manipulate the situation, though identifying his exact intentions proved difficult. My best option was to quietly observe and decipher the unfolding scenario. Then one day, after work, I returned home to a startling sight. A large moving truck parked in front of our house, emblazoned with the logo Moving Center. Henry was deep in conversation with the truck driver and several representatives. When our eyes met, he quickly averted his gaze and hurried back inside. To my shock, my in-laws arrived at the same time. They greeted me casually as if nothing were wrong, while Henry welcomed them with open arms, ushering them into the house. The tension in the air was palpable, signaling that significant changes were about to impact our living situation. As I followed Henry and his parents inside, I was struck by the dramatic transformation of our home. The familiar furnishings and personal items that once filled the space had vanished, replaced by my in-laws' outdated furniture, arranged as if they had already moved in. Sitting on the sofa, I was surrounded by their smirking smiles, radiating a sense of smugness. Their demeanor made it clear that this change wasn't spontaneous but part of a well-orchestrated plan. Feeling a mix of anxiety and determination, I opted to stay silent and observe what would unfold next. The anxious glances exchanged between my in-laws only intensified the already tense atmosphere. Soon, they hinted that there was something important they needed to discuss, suggesting an ulterior motive. Steeling myself and maintaining a calm facade, I listened as Henry took a deep breath and revealed that he had sold the house to his parents. He then proposed we get a divorce, and his parents nodded in agreement, their smug smiles betraying their satisfaction in orchestrating this situation. Despite the shocking revelation, I managed to stay composed, having suspected their scheming all along. I quickly signed the divorce papers, set my wedding ring on the table, and announced my decision to leave. My suspicions about Henry and his parents' deceitful behavior during their frequent visits while I was away had prompted me to take precautionary measures. I had installed surveillance cameras throughout the house, which I could access via my smartphone. Initially, I monitored their casual interactions, but it wasn't long before I stumbled upon footage that confirmed my worst fears. In the video, Henry and his parents were seen happily discussing the sale of the house. Shocked but now fully aware of their intentions, I began to plan my next steps carefully. Armed with evidence from the surveillance, I started searching for a new place to live, determined to move on from this betrayal. Taking decisive action, I initiated the transfer of the home loan from my name to Henry's. If they intended to force me out of our shared home, it only seemed fair that they should assume the mortgage payments and all associated responsibilities. With a monthly payment of $3,800, an amount drawn from my hard-earned salary, I had serious doubts about whether Henry and his parents, considering their current employment situations, could handle such a financial burden. Determined to sever all financial ties, I refrained from offering any support. Now free from the burdens of that relationship, I moved into a new, well-organized home furnished with fresh items, eager to start anew. On a tranquil day off, savoring the luxury of sleeping in past noon, my relaxation was abruptly shattered by the doorbell. To my surprise, Henry and his parents stood at my doorstep, uninvited and unexpected. They barged in without waiting for an invitation and spread a document in front of me, accusing me of illegally altering the loan terms without their consent. I was taken aback by their audacity. They explained that shortly after I had left the old house, they received notification of the loan name change. Henry and his parents, all currently unemployed, were stunned, claiming they couldn't afford the steep monthly payments. In a heated outburst, Henry insisted they wouldn't cover the costs. I tried to reason with them, explaining the consequences of defaulting on the loan, including how interest and late fees could significantly increase their financial burden. Henry listened, initially skeptical, but began to grasp the seriousness of the situation. When Henry looked at the loan information online, shock and distress washed over his face. I suggested it was time for them to explore new job opportunities for a fresh start. Their expressions grew even paler as the reality of their situation sank in. They confessed to having no savings or assets, with Henry burdened by significant gambling debts and lacking the steady income. They pleaded for understanding and assistance, referencing the years we had spent together. Unmoved by their appeals, I shut the door firmly, determined to distance myself from any attempts to salvage the relationship. Frustrated, they reported me to the police, which ultimately resulted in their removal from my property. Due to their financial struggles, they eventually moved to a more affordable apartment on the outskirts of town, where Henry managed to secure a part-time job to support his family. Meanwhile, my life continued on an even keel. I focused on my job and, in my spare time, started a blog about handmade crafts. The blog gained traction, leading to a substantial increase in my monthly income as requests for workshops and courses began to pour in. I had no intention of remarrying and was determined to navigate life on my own terms. One day, I stumbled upon an old household account book from the early days of my marriage. As I flipped through its pages, memories of our financial struggles flooded back. With a renewed sense of purpose, I resolved to carve out a new path toward happiness on my own. After reflecting on the past, I returned the account book to the shelf, ready to focus on creating a fulfilling future.
I was taken aback by the unexpected news that Thomas, my friend, sold the house I inherited from my dad for $450,000. The revelation came with an oddly cheerful tone as he shared it over the phone from the hospital. To add to the surprise, he boldly announced that he's planning to embark on a trip with his mistress. The whole situation struck me as sheer madness, leaving me bewildered. I couldn't fathom why Thomas would sell the house with sentimental value and make such an announcement. The news about abandoning his family, including his daughter Elizabeth, was particularly shocking. Thomas expressed a nonchalant attitude towards leaving Elizabeth behind, stating that she had been getting on his nerves and acting high and mighty. His callous remarks about his own child enraged me. As I processed the shocking news of Thomas selling the house and abandoning his family for his mistress, a mix of anger and shock overwhelmed me. It felt like I might lose my mind. I felt a strong urge to intervene and prevent Thomas from hastily disposing of the house. My name is Lisa Johnson, a 37.5-year-old homemaker. Life with my husband Thomas and our 8-year-old daughter Elizabeth has been far from harmonious. Marital discord has been escalating for a while, with suspicions of Thomas's infidelity lingering for about a year. Despite lacking concrete proof, his behavior, such as frequenting bars after work, returning with a peculiar sense, and gifting expensive items not meant for me, raised concerns. I've been too afraid to confront him about his potential affair, unable to take any decisive action. Reflecting on our relationship, I recall the Thomas I fell in love with a decade ago. His kindness and sincerity initially drew me in, and our marriage seemed blissful. However, things took a turn for the worse around the time our daughter Elizabeth turned 1. Parenting became more challenging, and as a full-time homemaker, I sought Thomas's assistance with tasks like baths and meals. Yet his behavior and frequent outings began to change, leaving me bewildered about how our once happy marriage ended up in this tumultuous state. In the beginning, Thomas, perhaps aware of his role as a father, initially assisted with childcare as I requested. However, as it became a daily routine, he gradually developed resentment and stopped actively participating in parenting. He started expressing sentiments like, "This is your job as a stay-at-home mom. You should handle parenting on your own. What does a tired man like me have to help out after work?" Thomas's complaints were intense, leaving me and Elizabeth alone in the living room while he retreated to the bedroom. Dealing with Elizabeth's tantrums and struggling through the evening routine alone, Thomas's harsh words lingered painfully. His withdrawal from interacting with Elizabeth became more pronounced, even on his days off. When Elizabeth asked him to play, he responded dismissively, saying, "Playing is your mom's job. I'm busy." Thomas didn't consider Elizabeth's feelings, scolding her if she cried and blaming my parenting skills. To shield Elizabeth from his verbal abuse, we often retreated to our room and played together, just the two of us. There were times when I yearned for personal hobbies like reading or watching movies. However, living with Elizabeth around the clock left little time for myself, while Thomas indulged in his horse racing hobby. The situation felt unfair, but I couldn't complain as our household relied on Thomas's income. I felt a sense of helplessness and frustration as I found myself unable to change the circumstances that had persisted for 8 long years. Thomas's disinterest in parenting and his abusive language became a distressing pattern, a far cry from the caring and kind Thomas I knew before our marriage. Despite enduring this situation, I knew it was essential to provide for Elizabeth, and Thomas's income was crucial for our survival. One day, while drawing together, Elizabeth complimented my artistic skills and suggested that I pursue drawing as a job. Despite Thomas's contemptuous nature, Elizabeth had grown up to be honest, straightforward, and cheerful, the opposite of my more introverted personality. It was heartening to see her thriving at school, surrounded by friends, and even earning the favor of her teacher. Elizabeth's compliments about my drawings filled me with pride and confidence, reminding me that she paid attention to me and appreciated my efforts. I was grateful for her positivity, which brought joy to our challenging family dynamics. As long as Elizabeth could smile, I felt a sense of resilience in facing the challenges of our life. That quiet realization echoed in my thoughts that night. However, our household situation took a familiar turn when Thomas, in his usual inebriated state, stumbled home and collapsed into the living room. His drinking habits had escalated lately, becoming a source of increasing concern. Sighing, I began the routine of peeling his jacket off his slumped body. In the process, a piece of paper fell from a pocket that typically housed only keys. Upon closer scrutiny, it revealed itself as a receipt from a motel. Unmistakable evidence confirming the suspicions I had only held vaguely until then. In an attempt to conceal the turmoil within me, I quietly stashed the receipt away on a shelf as the night unfolded. I contemplated how to address this revelation with Thomas. The next morning, with Thomas not yet fully sober, he left the house after Elizabeth had gone to school. Engrossed in my regular household tasks, I found it impossible to shake off the lingering thoughts of the previous day's revelation. Having suspected Thomas's infidelity without concrete evidence, the receipt presented a dilemma. It became challenging to ignore the truth and maintain the facade of a masked couple. I felt compelled to confront him, seek an admission, and perhaps an apology within the upcoming week or even days. Lost in contemplation, my smartphone interrupted my thoughts with an unexpected vibration. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen, triggering a sense of apprehension as I answered the call. The caller identified themselves as someone from General Hospital delivering news about Thomas. He had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. The doctor explained that Thomas's kidneys were likely to fail, necessitating a transplant. Overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, the doctor asked if I was all right. Despite the complex emotions, I found myself agreeing. As the doctor elaborated on the details of the transplant surgery, my mind swirled with confusion. Although Thomas had often mocked me and been unfaithful, I didn't wish for him to lose his life. That night, I held on to the hope for Thomas's recovery. My thoughts centered around his impending transplant surgery. As weeks passed, news about potential kidney transplant candidates within the family emerged. Surprisingly, I turned out to be the best match. The revelation that I was a compatible donor for Thomas, despite the challenges in our relationship, presented an unexpected twist in our story. The situation became more complex with the presence of Thomas's parents, who were still alive. The impending decision about organ donation required careful consideration, blending the threads of our troubled history with the possibility of a renewed connection through the transplant process. Despite my own less than perfect health, I emerged as the most suitable donor for Thomas's kidney transplant due to our matching blood types and the fact that he was an only child. Admittedly, I had reservations about undergoing the surgery, but the prospect of preserving Thomas's life overshadowed any hesitations. Recognizing the irreplaceable value of Thomas's existence, I made the difficult decision to be his kidney donor. When I shared Thomas's medical condition and our upcoming transplant surgery with Elizabeth, she responded with understanding and encouragement, sending me off with her blessing. Elizabeth stayed with my in-laws during my hospitalization, and despite their own health challenges, they were able to care for Elizabeth, who happily stayed with them, sharing a close bond with her grandparents. This arrangement provided me with a sense of relief, knowing that Elizabeth was in good hands. With that reassurance, I faced the kidney transplant surgery a week later. After completing the necessary health checks and signing consent forms, I donated my kidney to Thomas. The surgery, to my surprise, concluded more swiftly than anticipated. I spent approximately a week in the hospital, while Thomas's recovery extended to 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery process proceeded smoothly. Just before my scheduled discharge, I received an unexpected call that sent a shiver down my spine. Answering the phone, I was met with Thomas's voice, the recipient of my kidney. Expecting words of gratitude for the life-saving donation, I inquired about his well-being after the surgery. However, Thomas' response took an unforeseen turn as he shifted the conversation to our house. In an inappropriately cheerful tone, he disclosed that he had sold our house for $450,000 and intended to embark on a trip with his mistress. The news struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I couldn't comprehend the audacity of his actions. The house, a precious inheritance from my father, was being callously disposed of, and Thomas's brazen declaration of having a mistress added another layer of shock in the midst of my disbelief. I confronted him about Elizabeth's well-being, only to be met with indifference. Thomas callously dismissed any concerns for our daughter, stating that he didn't care and was leaving her behind. The revelation left me enraged and appalled. The thought of him selling the house and abandoning his own daughter was beyond comprehension. Determined to intervene, I realized that I needed to stop Thomas from hastily relinquishing the house. As the call abruptly ended, my mind swirled with turmoil. I was left grappling with the shocking news of Thomas's actions and contemplating how to prevent him from following through with his impulsive decisions. The urgency to protect our home and Elizabeth's well-being became a pressing matter that demanded immediate attention. Trying to comprehend the sudden upheaval caused by Thomas's actions, I found myself unable to believe that he had sold our house, especially while he was in the hospital. The shock of this revelation worsened my condition, leading to an extension of my hospital stay. Feeling helpless and distressed, I spent days on the hospital bed contemplating the next steps. My first instinct was to call Elizabeth. Without the house, we would have nowhere to go. Despite my anger towards Thomas's bold declaration about his mistress, my primary concern was Elizabeth's well-being. Calling my in-laws home, Elizabeth answered the phone, and I anxiously questioned her about how she was doing and whether she felt lonely. I also mentioned the news about our house being sold by Dad. Elizabeth's response was unexpectedly reassuring. She calmly assured me that she had taken care of things. Intrigued and puzzled by her words, I listened as she explained that Dad had told her he asked his mistress to sell the house. Elizabeth had navigated through this unexpected turn of events, leaving me surprised and proud of her maturity. She reassured me that everything was fine, expressing gratitude for my concern. Encouraged by Elizabeth's composure, I allowed a bit of peace to settle in. However, curiosity lingered about what was happening with Thomas and his mistress at that very moment. Reminding myself of the importance of rest, I allowed sleep to claim me. After 3 days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. Elizabeth greeted me with joy, and my mother-in-law smiled gently, expressing happiness at my return. However, my father-in-law wore a grim expression, apologizing for Thomas's actions. I couldn't fathom how Thomas had strayed so far from the values of his wonderful parents. Despite the apology, I took some responsibility, acknowledging that perhaps I should have spoken up sooner. As the conversation progressed, my in-laws revealed that they wouldn't let Thomas have his way. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, Elizabeth and I attempted to head home. On our way, though, we encountered an unexpected scene in front of a realtor's office. There, we witnessed a familiar yet disheveled Thomas and an unknown woman, presumably his mistress, engaged in a heated argument. Dressed in sweatpants with unkempt hair, Thomas was visibly distressed, while the mistress, wearing a short skirt with a single high heel and a bare face, expressed frustration about the house not being sold and the canceled purchase of $450,000. The chaotic scene unfolded before us, adding another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. Thomas's enraged stomping and his mistress's screeching drew shocked looks from passers-by. Elizabeth and I, equally surprised, approached them, seeking an explanation. Upon questioning Thomas about his actions, he and his mistress were visibly taken aback, gasping in surprise. Accusations were immediately thrown our way, with Thomas suggesting that I must have talked the buyer out of the deal. Dismissing their baseless claims and instinctively shielding Elizabeth behind me, I faced their accusations. The realtor, confused by the unfolding drama, reacted with disbelief upon learning that I was Thomas's wife. The cancellation of the house purchase had disrupted their plans, and Thomas, pointing at his mistress, claimed to still have debts from the money he spent on her. It slowly dawned on me that Thomas' intention was to sell the house to settle debts incurred for his mistress and secure a new place for both of them. The realization hit me like a wave. Thomas was fully aware that the house was a precious inheritance from my father. To think he would disregard Elizabeth and me, attempting to seize my most valuable asset, was beyond belief. Anger welled up within me as I confronted Thomas. Despite the critical situation, he continued to hurl insults, displaying a complete lack of decency. I pointed out the audacity of him trying to sell my house without discussion, emphasizing that I was the rightful owner. My anger intensified as I questioned whether he had forged documents to proceed with the sale. Furthermore, I revealed a surprising twist. Thomas had been bad-mouthing the supposed buyers of the house, unaware that they were his own parents. The revelation about my in-laws' involvement came from Elizabeth, who had spoken to them about Thomas's misdeeds. Infuriated by their son's actions, my in-laws decided to intervene to protect both Lisa and their good-hearted granddaughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth stepped forward confidently, explaining that her grandparents were well aware of the house's significance to me and disapproved of its easy sale. In a strategic move, they had pretended to buy the house before anyone else could. Thomas, desperate and defeated, unleashed a vulgar laugh and lashed out at Elizabeth and her grandparents. However, Elizabeth remained unfazed by his verbal assault, and in response, I retrieved a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it under Thomas's nose, ready to confront him with undeniable evidence. The unfolding drama showcased the complexities of family dynamics and the lengths one would go to protect the ones they love. Brandishing the divorce papers, I confronted Thomas with a resolute declaration: I want a divorce. However, instead of acknowledging the gravity of the situation, Thomas snorted and scoffed, questioning my ability to live without him. Unfazed by his arrogance, I decided it was time to dispel his misguided assumptions. Determined to shatter Thomas's illusions, I calmly informed him that I had a plan. You needn't worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents, I declared. The mention of a lifetime gift left Thomas and his mistress bewildered. I went on to explain that my in-laws, recognizing their declining health, wished to give me a portion of their assets before it was too late. Initially, I suggested that such a gift should go to Thomas. However, my in-laws insisted that I, as the one who had given them a lovely granddaughter, were more important to them than a son who couldn't even express gratitude for a life-saving organ donation. Grateful for their generosity, I accepted the lifetime gift, leaving Thomas pale and agitated. Outraged by the turn of events, Thomas protested, calling it dirty and unjust. He threatened to take the matter to court, but I calmly reminded him that it was his fault for spending all that money, and his parents had made a justified decision. Dismissing his threats, I questioned whether he even had the financial means to go to court, highlighting the consequences of his past betrayals. Closing the distance to Thomas and delivering the final blow, I made it clear that every penny of compensation for emotional distress and child support would be sought. Unleashing a stern warning, I stated that if he couldn't pay, I would chase him to the ends of the earth to collect. Thomas, desperate and shaken, begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Glaring at him with unwavering determination, I declared that I would pursue every avenue to hold him accountable for insulting Elizabeth and me. As Thomas and his mistress screamed and ran away, the realtor who had witnessed the entire confrontation expressed gratitude for the resolution. Acknowledging the awkwardness of the situation, I apologized for any trouble caused, ready to move forward with the next chapter of my life. Taking Elizabeth's hand, we headed home, and she expressed gratitude for standing up for her. A smile adorned Elizabeth's face, and in that moment, I made a silent vow to protect her for the rest of our lives. The divorce from Thomas unfolded without any significant issues, marking the end of a long-suffering marriage. Surprisingly, it was almost anticlimactic, prompting me to reflect on why I had endured everything until now. It became apparent that Thomas had invested a considerable amount of money into his affair and had resorted to borrowing funds from various sources. His mistress eventually left him, citing an inability to be with such a financially troubled man. Misfortunes seemed to converge for Thomas as his company had to cut back on staff due to a decrease in sales caused by material shortages. Working in the factory, Thomas was among the first to be laid off. While it may be inconvenient for him, it's challenging to believe he was laid off for no reason. It's likely that the company let go of those who underperformed or had poor conduct, which might have been the case for Thomas, given his demeanor at home. Now unemployed, he is scraping by with part-time jobs, lacking the energy to actively search for a new full-time position. His life seems bleak, having lost his job, lover, and wife. But there's little room for sympathy. Despite my efforts, including donating a part of my kidney to him, Thomas made a mockery of me. It appears that karma has caught up with him, and he should focus on working hard to pay off his debt. As for me, I've started doing illustration work, utilizing the assets I inherited from my in-laws. Initially inspired by Elizabeth's compliment about my drawing skills, I have received positive feedback from clients who appreciate the meticulous and skillful nature of my work. The plan is to increase my clientele and work diligently to provide a better life for Elizabeth.
My name is Emily, a 33-year-old woman with a passion for neatness and organization. I work as an auditor at a large firm, and my friends often tease me about my obsession with keeping receipts and paying taxes on time. But I believe these little habits are what keep my life running smoothly. Let me tell you how I met my husband, Jake. It was at a party hosted by our mutual friend, Lisa. I remember that evening clearly. I was sipping a glass of wine and catching up with some old college friends when Jake walked in. He was a bit older, carrying himself with a confident stride and a charming smile. He worked as a manager at a food sales company. "Hey, I'm Jake. Do you mind if I join you?" he asked, holding a beer and looking directly at me. "Sure, I'm Emily. Nice to meet you," I replied, smiling back at him. We started talking, and I was surprised by how effortlessly the conversation flowed. We discovered a mutual love for hiking and a shared passion for classic rock music. A few months into our relationship, Jake invited me to his sister Sarah's barbecue. It was my first time meeting his family, and I was a bit nervous. When we arrived, Sarah greeted us warmly, but her 3 kids were a whirlwind of energy, running around and tossing toys everywhere. "Hey Sarah, this is Emily," Jake said, introducing me. "Nice to meet you, Emily. These are my little rascals, Mike, Tom, and Lily," Sarah said, barely holding on to Tom as he wriggled out of her grasp. "Nice to meet you all," I replied, trying to hide my unease. As the evening went on, the kids became wilder, climbing on furniture, throwing food, and yelling at the top of their lungs. I glanced at Jake, hoping he'd say something, but he just smiled and shrugged. "Aren't they just full of energy?" he said, chuckling. I forced a smile. "Yeah, they sure are." As our relationship progressed, Jake and I started discussing the future. He proposed to me during a hike on a beautiful hill overlooking the valley. It was simple and sweet, just the way I liked it. Our wedding was lovely, aside from one little hiccup: Sarah's kids. They were at it again, running around, making a mess, and being loud. Sarah didn't seem to care, and Jake found it amusing. "Look at them. They're having so much fun," Jake said, laughing as he watched them spill drinks and toss food around. "Yeah, but they're also making a huge mess," I replied, trying to keep my irritation in check. "Oh, come on, Em, they're just kids. Let them enjoy," he said, shrugging it off. I didn't want to spoil our special day by arguing, so I let it go, hoping things would improve once we settled into our new life together. After we got married, Jake and I decided to buy a house together. We had been living in a rented apartment, but we wanted a place to call our own. I was really excited about this new chapter in our lives. One evening after work, Jake and I sat down to discuss our finances and how we'd manage the expenses for our new home. "Emily, we need to figure out how we're going to split the costs," Jake said, leaning back on the couch. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," I replied. "I can handle the furniture, appliances, and some art pieces. What about you?" "Well, I was thinking I could buy you a new car. I know your old one is giving you trouble," Jake suggested. I was surprised and delighted. "Really? That would be amazing. My car is practically falling apart." "Yeah, I've seen it struggle. It's time you had something reliable," he said with a smile. We started house hunting right away. After a few weeks of searching, we found a beautiful house that we both loved. It was a bit pricey, but we decided it was worth it. Moving in was hectic, but I was excited about decorating our new home. I spent a lot of time selecting furniture and appliances, ensuring everything was high quality and stylish. One Saturday, Jake surprised me with a new car. It was a sleek, shiny sedan, and I was thrilled. "Jake, this is incredible. Thank you so much," I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "You're welcome, Emily. You deserve it," he said, looking proud of himself. As we settled into our new home, everything seemed to be going well. We both enjoyed our jobs and loved coming back to our cozy house. But as time passed, little things started to bother me. Jake's laid-back attitude, which I once found charming, began to get on my nerves, especially when it came to household chores. "Jake, can you help me with the dishes tonight?" I asked one evening after dinner. "Em, I had a long day at work. Can't we just leave them for tomorrow?" he replied, giving me pleading eyes. "Jake, we can't keep putting things off. I'm tired too, but we need to keep this place clean," I insisted. "Fine, I'll do it," he said, sighing heavily as he got up from the couch. A few months into our marriage, I started worrying because I couldn't get pregnant. It was really stressing me out. I went to the doctor, and he told me to be patient, that it would happen when the time was right. Still, it was hard not to worry. Meanwhile, Jake's sister Sarah, with her 3 kids, was visiting a lot. Sarah lived in a neighboring state, but you'd think she lived next door with how often she was around. Every time she came over, she'd unload all her problems with her husband on me. It was nonstop. During dinner, while we were trying to relax, she'd be at it, talking about her issues. "Emily, you won't believe what John did this time," Sarah would start, rolling her eyes. "Sarah, can we talk about something else for once?" I'd ask, trying to steer the conversation away from her marital drama. "Oh, come on, Emily, I need to vent. You're the only one who understands," she'd reply, not getting the hint at all. And her kids? They were a nightmare. As soon as they stepped into our house, it was like a circus. They'd run around, fight with each other, throw food, and just be loud. After a long week at work, all I wanted was some peace and quiet, but that was impossible with those kids around. Guys, can you calm down, please? I'd say, trying to keep my cool as they tore through the living room. Why are you always so uptight, Emily? Sarah would snap at me whenever I tried to get her kids to behave. They're making a mess, Sarah. I just cleaned the house, I'd respond, feeling my patience wearing thin. Well, maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand, she shot back one day, her words hitting me like a punch in the gut. I was stunned by how insensitive she was, especially knowing how much I was struggling with getting pregnant. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't believe Jake didn't say anything to defend me. Jake, are you going to let her talk to me like that? I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Emily, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing, he said, siding with her again. A big deal out of nothing? She just insulted me in my own home, I shouted, feeling the tears well up. I was so done. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly disrespected in my own home, with my husband always taking his sister's side. It was clear to me that something had to change, and soon. One Saturday, Sarah showed up with her 3 kids. She dumped them on me and said, Emily, I need a break from parenting. I'm going shopping. I couldn't help but chuckle when she said, parenting. The woman barely knew what that meant. Every time she's here, it's like a zoo. Fine, Sarah, but you better be quick, I said, already feeling the stress coming on. Thanks, Emily, you're a lifesaver, she chirped, grabbing her purse and bolting out the door before I could say anything else. Great, I thought, just what I needed. I was in the kitchen, trying to cook dinner. It's a long process and I like things done right, but with those kids running wild, it was impossible to focus. They were yelling, running around, and making a mess. Guys, can you keep it down? I shouted from the kitchen, hoping they'd listen for once. Of course they didn't. Suddenly I heard a loud crash. My heart sank. I ran into the living room, and there it was, my grandfather's antique Chinese vase, shattered on the floor. My chest tightened with anger and frustration. What the hell happened here? I screamed, looking at the kids who were now standing still with guilty expressions. We were just playing, one of them mumbled, not meeting my eyes. This vase is priceless. It's from my grandfather. Do you have any idea what you've done? I was livid, shaking with anger. Just then, Jake walked in, looking calm and clueless. What's going on? Emily, your nephews just broke my grandfather's vase. Look at this mess. I pointed at the shattered pieces on the floor. Calm down, Emily. It's just a vase. We can get it fixed, he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. Just a vase? This isn't about the vase, Jake. It's about respect. I'm tired of this. Every time Sarah comes over, our house turns into a disaster zone, and you don't care, I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. Just then, Sarah walked in, bags in hand, looking annoyed. What's all this yelling about? Your kids broke my grandfather's vase, Sarah. Look at this mess. I pointed at the floor, trying to hold back my tears. Well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them, Emily, she said, not even bothering to apologize. Are you kidding me? They're your kids, Sarah. I shouldn't have to watch them. I was furious, my hands shaking with anger. Jake just shook his head, looking annoyed. You're overreacting, Emily. Just drop it. Overreacting? I've had enough of this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home, I screamed, the tears finally spilling over. Jake just stood there, silent and cold, while Sarah smirked like she had won some sort of victory. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the room, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. We'd been dealing with Sarah and her kids' chaotic visits for months, but I had no idea what was coming next. One morning, Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, munching on his toast when he casually dropped a bombshell on me. Emily, I need to tell you something. Sarah's getting divorced, and she's moving in with us with the kids for a few months. He said like he was just telling me the weather. I almost dropped my coffee. What? Are you serious? Our house is already a madhouse when they visit for a day. How are we supposed to handle them living here for months? She's my sister, Emily. She needs our help. You need to be more understanding, he said, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Understanding? I've been more than understanding, Jake, but this is too much. Why can't we rent a place for her nearby? I'll even pay for the first month's rent, I suggested, trying to keep my cool. No, she'll be better off here. Plus, you can help with the kids and keep things clean, he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I'm not a babysitter, Jake. I work too and I need to relax when I get home, I said, my frustration boiling over. Stop being so selfish, Emily. It's family. They need us, he said, his tone getting sharper. I'm not being selfish, Jake. I'm just asking for a reasonable solution. I'm not going to let my life be turned upside down, I said, feeling my anger bubbling up. Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you better get used to the idea, he said, standing up and heading out of the kitchen. I couldn't believe it. I felt completely blindsided and betrayed. The next morning, I woke up early, still fuming from our argument. I got dressed for work and went to grab my car keys, but they were nowhere to be found. When I called Jake, he picked up the phone, sounding way too calm for my liking. I took the car. It's mine, remember? I'm giving it to Sarah so she can use it for the kids. I was stunned into silence for a moment. You're giving my car to Sarah? Are you serious right now? It's not your car, Emily. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do, he said, his tone matter of fact. That's the last straw, Jake. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with anger. What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Emily, he said, clearly not getting it. I stood there in the hallway, holding my phone, unable to believe what was happening. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had things gotten so bad? I picked up the phone and called a moving company. Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent. The movers arrived a couple of hours later. I showed them around the house, pointing out the items to be moved. Take everything. The beds, sofas, chandeliers, even the faucets in the bathroom. The movers got to work, and soon the house started to look empty. I felt a strange sense of relief watching them carry out each piece of furniture. As the last item was loaded onto the truck, I directed them to my mom's house. Everything goes there. Thanks for the quick work, guys, I said, handing them a tip. With the house now bare, I grabbed my essentials and headed to my mom's place. A few hours later, my phone started buzzing. It was Jake calling repeatedly. I ignored the calls, feeling a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. That evening, there was a loud knock on my mom's door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, looking furious. What the hell, Emily? What did you do? He shouted as he stormed into the living room. I took my stuff, Jake. You took the car, so I took what I bought, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is insane. You stripped the house bare. Where are Sarah and the kids supposed to sleep? He yelled, his face red with anger. That's your problem, Jake. You made this mess, now you deal with it, I replied, crossing my arms. You're a thief, Emily. You stole everything. He shouted, waving his arms around. I didn't steal anything. Here are the receipts, I said, pulling out a folder and showing him the proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He looked through the receipts, his anger shifting to frustration. Fine, Emily, if this is how you want to play it. I'll file for divorce, Jake said. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. Already done. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them, and we're done. He stared at the papers, his face pale. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, Jake. I deserve better than this, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. He took a pen from his pocket, signed the papers without another word, and handed them back to me. Fine, Emily, have it your way. I watched as he turned and walked out of my mom's house, the door slamming behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. It was over, and I knew it was the right decision. That night, I sat down with my mom and talked about everything that had happened. She was supportive and agreed that I had made the right choice. Emily, you've been through a lot. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness, she said, giving me a comforting hug. Thanks, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out, I replied, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. Over the next few days, I started to settle into a new routine. I began organizing my new space at my mom's house and planning my next steps. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had reclaimed my life, and there was no turning back. After divorcing Jake, we sold our house and split the money. I decided it was time to really set up my new place. My mom's house was great for a bit, but I needed my own space. One afternoon, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mom, scrolling through listings on my laptop. Mom, I think I found a place that looks perfect. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work, I said, showing her the pictures. She looked over my shoulder and smiled. That looks nice, Emily. Have you called the realtor yet? Not yet, but I'm going to do that right now, I said, feeling a bit excited. I dialed the number and waited for the realtor to pick up. After a few rings, a friendly voice answered. Hello, this is Mark. How can I help you? Hi, Mark, my name is Emily. I'm interested in the apartment you have listed downtown. Is it still available? I asked, crossing my fingers. Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a viewing? He replied, sounding hopeful. Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon? I suggested, trying to sound calm. That works for me. I'll see you at 3:00 p.m., Mark said before we ended the call. The next day, I headed downtown to meet Mark and check out the apartment. When I arrived, he was waiting outside the building, a friendly smile on his face. Hi, Emily. Nice to meet you. "Let me show you around," he said, shaking my hand. The apartment was small but cozy, just what I needed. It had a nice kitchen, a spacious living room, and a small balcony with a decent view of the city. "This place is perfect, Mark. I'll take it," I said, feeling a sense of relief. After signing the mortgage agreement and getting the keys, I started planning my move. I wanted to make this new space my own, a fresh start. I spent the next few days packing up my things at my mom's house and arranging for movers to help me with the big stuff. On moving day, my mom and a couple of close friends came over to help. As we loaded the last box into the moving truck, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about this new chapter in my life. "Emily, this is going to be great for you. A fresh start is just what you need," my mom said, giving me a reassuring hug. "Thanks, Mom. I'm really looking forward to it," I replied, smiling. We drove to my new apartment, and with everyone's help, we had everything unloaded and set up in no time. As I looked around my new place, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was ready for it. That evening, I invited my mom and friends to stay for dinner to celebrate the move. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and laughter. "Cheers to Emily and her new place," my friend Lisa said, raising her glass of soda. "Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your help and support," I said, feeling grateful. As the night went on, we talked and laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy and free. After the party, as I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, I thought about everything I had been through and how far I had come. I was proud of myself for taking control of my life and making the changes I needed. I heard from some mutual friends that Jake used his share of the money to buy a small apartment. Now he's living there with Sarah and her 3 kids. Jake's working 2 jobs to keep up with the bills, while Sarah still isn't working. They're fighting all the time. One day, out of the blue, Jake called me. I was surprised to see his name pop up on my phone, but I decided to answer, curious about what he had to say. "Hello, Jake. What's up?" I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Emily, please just hear me out," he started, sounding desperate. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize how hard it was for you with Sarah's kids." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "Really, Jake? You're realizing this now, after all this time?" "Yeah, I know it's late, but I'm serious. I've been thinking a lot, and I miss you. I miss us. Can we start over? I'm ready to move into your apartment and make things right," he said, his voice almost pleading. I chuckled, shaking my head in disbelief. "Jake, you've got to be kidding me. You think you can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened?" "Emily, I'm serious. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll even take on more work to make it up to you," he said, sounding more desperate. "Jake, I've moved on. I'm happy now. I'm not looking to go back to that mess," I replied firmly. "Come on, Emily. We can make it work this time. I've changed," he insisted. I sighed, feeling a mix of pity and irritation. "Jake, it's over. You need to focus on your life and your family. I'm not interested in going back to that chaos." "Emily, please, I'm begging you," he said, his voice breaking. "Jake, no. I found peace without you. I'm not giving that up," I said, standing my ground. "Take care, Jake. I hope you find your way." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. It was clear that Jake was struggling, but I couldn't let his problems drag me back into a situation I had worked so hard to escape. Later that day, I met up with Lisa for coffee and told her about the call. "You won't believe who called me today," I said, rolling my eyes. "Who?" Lisa asked, raising an eyebrow. "Jake. He actually begged me to take him back and let him move into my apartment," I said, shaking my head. Lisa laughed, almost spitting out her coffee. "Are you serious? What did you say?" I told him no, of course. "I'm not going back to that mess," I replied, smiling. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, and I realized how far I had come. I had built a new life for myself, one that was peaceful and fulfilling. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As I walked home, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. I had finally closed the chapter on that part of my life, and I was ready to move forward with confidence and joy.